The horse screamed before it fell. Clara hit the ground hard, tasting dust and blood, her wedding dress torn to rags. Behind her, 3 riders crested the hill, Garrett's men, sent to drag her back to a marriage she'd rather die than accept. Her father's land, her freedom, everything she had left would disappear the moment they caught her. She scrambled to her feet, ribs screaming, and ran toward nothing but empty prairie. No cover, no help, just sun and wind and the certainty that she wouldn't make it another mile. Before we begin, if you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The sun had teeth out here. Clara felt them now, sinking into her shoulders, the back of her neck, every exposed inch of skin that her shredded dress couldn't cover anymore. Her boots, made for parlors, not running, had rubbed her heels raw an hour ago. Maybe 2. Time didn't hold shape when you were dying. She stumbled over a rock she should have seen, caught herself on her palms, kept moving. Stopping meant thinking. Thinking meant remembering the way Garrett Moss had smiled at her across her father's casket, that patient predator's smile that said, "You're mine now, just a matter of time." 3 weeks later, he'd shown up with a preacher and half the county, acting like her saying yes was a formality. She'd said no. Then she'd run. The prairie stretched in every direction, blonde grass rippling like dirty water under the wind. No trees, no shelter. Nothing but land that didn't give a damn whether you lived or died on it. Her chest burned with each breath, her vision swimming at the edges. She'd lost her canteen when the horse went down. Lost everything except the clothes barely hanging on her body and the absolute certainty that going back was worse than whatever happened out here. A gunshot cracked the air. Clara's heart kicked against her ribs. She didn't look back, couldn't afford to waste the energy. But she heard the voices now, carrying on the wind. Got her tracks. She can't have gone far on foot. Garrett wants her brought back clean, you hear? No marks where they'll show. Her stomach twisted. Clean, like she was livestock, like her consent was just another thing Garrett Moss could buy or take, same as he'd taken half the water rights in the county. Same as he'd swallowed up 3 neighboring ranches when their owners mysteriously couldn't make payments. Her father had been the only thing standing between Garrett and the Vance land, 1,200 acres with the sweetest water and the best grazing for 50 miles. And now her father was 6 feet under with a heart that supposedly just gave out, though he'd been healthy as a horse the week before Garrett started coming around. Clara knew better. Everyone knew better. Nobody said a damn thing. She crested a low rise and her legs nearly gave out. More nothing, just endless grass and heat shimmer and sky so big it felt like drowning. Her lips were cracked, tongue thick in her mouth. She tried to work up spit and couldn't. Keep moving. Just keep moving. But her body was done negotiating. Her knee buckled, and this time she went down hard, eating dirt, the impact punching the air from her lungs. She rolled onto her back, gasping, staring up at that brutal blue sky, and felt the fight start to leak out of her. Maybe this was it. Maybe dying out here, free, was better than... A shadow fell across her face. Clara's eyes snapped open, her hand scrabbling uselessly for a weapon she didn't have, some animal part of her brain still trying to fight. But the shape standing over her wasn't one of Garrett's men. It was a man on horseback, perfectly still, silhouetted against the sun so she couldn't see his face. Tall, lean, long dark hair lifting slightly in the wind. He sat his horse like he'd been born on it, like the animal was just an extension of his own body. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he spoke, his voice low and careful. "You're dying." Not a question, just a fact. Clara tried to answer, but her throat was too dry. She managed something between a cough and a laugh, tasting copper. "Good guess?" He swung down from his horse in one smooth motion, and that's when she saw him clearly. Apache, she thought, though she'd never been good at telling the different tribes apart. Dark eyes that took in everything, her torn dress, her bloody hands, the bruises on her arms that were already turning purple. His face gave away nothing. He pulled a water skin from his saddle and crouched beside her, holding it out. Clara stared at it, her brain struggling to catch up. This didn't make sense. White women didn't get helped by Apache warriors in the middle of nowhere. They got killed or taken or worse. Everyone knew that. Everyone said so. But everyone also said Garrett Moss was a good man, and that her father died of natural causes. She took the water skin. The water was warm and tasted like leather, and it was the best thing she'd ever put in her mouth. She drank too fast, choked, drank more. He didn't try to stop her or tell her to slow down, just waited. When she finally lowered the skin, gasping, he was still watching her with those unreadable eyes. "Thank you," she managed. He didn't acknowledge it. "Why are you running?" The directness of it caught her off guard. No preamble, no pleasantries, just straight to the bone of things. She wiped her mouth with the back of her hand, feeling the split in her lower lip crack open again. "Men chasing me." "How many?" "3, maybe 4. They work for—" She stopped. Saying Garrett's name out loud felt dangerous, like it might summon him. "For a man who wants something I won't give." The warrior's eyes flicked to the bruises on her arms, then back to her face. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. "They'll catch you soon," he said. "You can't run anymore." "I know." The admission tasted like ash. "But I can't go back." Another gunshot, closer this time. Clara flinched. The warrior didn't. He stood in one fluid motion and turned toward the sound, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. For a moment she thought he was going to leave her, just mount up and disappear into the prairie like he'd never been there at all. Instead, he looked down at her. "Can you ride?" Clara blinked. "What?" "Can you ride?" he repeated, each word deliberate. Yes, but—" He was already moving, gathering his horse's reins. The animal was a paint, brown and white, better fed and cared for than most horses she'd seen. He swung up into the saddle, then reached down toward her. Clara stared at his hand. This was insane. She didn't know this man, didn't know where he'd take her or what he'd want in return, but she could hear Garrett's men getting closer, their voices carrying on the wind, and she knew exactly what they'd do when they caught her. She grabbed his hand. His grip was iron strong. He pulled her up behind him like she weighed nothing, and she barely had time to get her arms around his waist before he kicked the horse into motion. The prairie blurred. Wind tore at her hair, her ruined dress. She held on, pressing her face against his back, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. He smelled like sage smoke and leather and open sky. Behind them, she heard shouting. More gunshots, wild and angry. "There! That's her! Who the hell is that with her? Shoot them! Shoot them both!" The warrior didn't flinch, didn't slow. He guided the horse with subtle shifts of his weight, reading the land like a language Clara didn't speak. They dropped into a ravine she hadn't seen, followed a dry stream bed, cut through a stand of scrub cedar that appeared out of nowhere. The shots faded. The voices grew distant. They rode. When he finally slowed the horse, the sun was starting its long slide toward the horizon, turning the whole sky the color of a healing bruise. Clara's entire body ached. Her arms felt like they might fall off from holding on so long, her legs screaming from gripping the horse's flanks. But they'd stopped, and she could no longer hear anyone chasing them. The warrior swung down and turned to help her. She slid off clumsily, her legs nearly buckling when they hit solid ground. He caught her elbow, steadying her without comment. "We'll stop here," he said, nodding toward a cluster of rocks that formed a rough shelter. "They won't find us before dark." Clara looked around, trying to get her bearings. The landscape all looked the same to her, grass and rock and distance. "How do you know?" "Because I know where they're looking, and this isn't it." He moved away, starting to unsaddle his horse with economical movements. Clara stood there, swaying slightly, her brain still trying to process what had just happened. This stranger, this Apache warrior who had every reason to leave her to her fate, had just saved her life. Why? The word came out before she could stop it. He glanced at her. "Why what? Why did you help me?" For a long moment he didn't answer. He finished with the saddle, set it carefully on the ground, then turned to face her fully. "Your bruises," he said quietly. "They're not from running." Heat flooded Clara's face. She'd forgotten about them, or tried to. The handprints on her upper arms where Garrett had grabbed her when she'd tried to leave the church. The one on her wrist from when his man Silas had caught her at the door. She crossed her arms over her chest, defensive. "That's not an answer." "Yes, it is." He walked past her toward the rocks, carrying his saddle and gear. After a moment, Clara followed because what else was she going to do? Die of pride out here in the open? The shelter was better than it looked from the outside, a natural formation that created an overhang, blocking the worst of the wind. He set his saddle down, then started gathering dried grass and small sticks for a fire. Clara watched him work, this stranger she'd tied her survival to. He moved with absolute certainty, no wasted motion, no hesitation. Everything he did seemed to have a purpose. "What's your name?" she asked finally. He looked up from the fire he was building. "Kael." "I'm Clara." She hesitated. "Clara Vance." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, though she couldn't imagine how he'd know her name. But he just nodded and went back to the fire. "You should sit," he said. "You're still shaking." She was, she realized, her whole body trembling with exhaustion and delayed terror, and the crash that came after running on pure fear for hours. She sank down onto a flat rock, pulling her knees up to her chest, and watched Kael coax the fire to life. The first flames caught, small and hungry. He fed them carefully, building them up until real warmth started to radiate outward. Clara leaned toward it without thinking, chasing the heat. "Your father," Kael said, not looking at her. "He's dead." It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. 3 months ago. And the man chasing you wants your land. Wants me to marry him. The land comes with. She laughed, bitter. "That's how he sees it anyway. Me and the ranch, all in one package." Kael added another stick to the fire. "You said no." "I said hell no." The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Hard to tell. "So he sent his men," Kael continued, still in that same level tone, like they were discussing the weather. "He came himself, actually. Brought a preacher and half the town. Figured I'd just go along with it." Clara's hands curled into fists. "When I ran, he sent his dogs after me. The 3 men. Garrett's foreman and 2 ranch hands. They're supposed to bring me back." She swallowed hard. "Clean," they said. "No marks where they'll show." Kael's hand stilled on the stick he was holding. When he looked at her, there was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Not anger exactly. Something colder. "They won't touch you," he said. "You can't know that." "Yes, I can." The certainty in his voice sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cooling air. Clara studied him across the fire, trying to understand what she was seeing. He couldn't be much older than her, late 20s, maybe 30, but he carried himself like someone who'd seen too much, done too much. Like violence was a language he spoke fluently. "Why are you out here alone?" she asked. "Don't Apache usually—" She trailed off, realizing how little she actually knew, how much was just stories and rumors. "Travel in groups?" Kael finished. "Sometimes. Not always." "That's not really an answer." "No," he agreed. "It's not." He stood and moved to his saddlebags, pulling out strips of dried meat and something that looked like compressed cornmeal. He handed half to Clara without ceremony. She took it, her stomach cramping at the sight of food. When was the last time she'd eaten? Yesterday morning? The day before? She bit into the meat, forcing herself to chew slowly even though every instinct screamed at her to wolf it down. They ate in silence, the fire crackling between them. The sky deepened from purple to indigo to something close to black, stars beginning to prick through. Clara had never been out on the prairie at night like this, had never been anywhere at night without walls and doors and the illusion of safety. "Tell me about the men chasing you," Kael said suddenly. "Everything you know." Clara swallowed her mouthful of food. "The foreman's name is Silas Hatch. He's been with Garrett for years. Mean, but not stupid. Good tracker." "Armed?" "Rifle and a pistol, probably. The other 2, Billy Crane and a man they call Dutch. They're just ranch hands, more muscle than brains, but they'll do what Silas tells them." Kael nodded, absorbing this. "And Garrett Moss. Tell me about him." The name made her stomach clench. "He owns the biggest spread in the county, Moss Ranch. About 5,000 acres, last I heard. He's been buying up land for years, one way or another." "One way or another," Kael repeated. "Accidents, bad loans, sudden deaths." Clara stared into the fire. "My father stood up to him, refused to sell. Then his heart gave out in the middle of the night." She looked up, meeting Kael's eyes. You think I'm paranoid? No. Everyone else does. I'm not everyone else. Something in the way he said it made Clara's throat tight. She looked away, back at the flames. Garrett's smart, she continued. Rich, connected. The sheriff's in his pocket. Hell, half the county's in his pocket. And he's patient. He doesn't make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. Not him. Not so far. Cale was quiet for a moment, then, forcing you to marry him. That's a mistake. Clara let out a shaky breath that might have been a laugh. Tell him that. I might. The flat certainty in his voice sent another shiver through her. She hugged her knees tighter, suddenly very aware of how alone they were out here, how little she knew about this man who'd saved her. You're not what I expected, she said quietly. Kael raised an eyebrow. What did you expect? I don't know. The stories... She stopped, feeling her face heat. Never mind. That's not fair. Stories, Kael said. White people love stories about my people. Most of them are lies. I know, Clara struggled for words. You're helping me. I can't figure out why. Maybe I don't like men who hurt women. Is that all? He looked at her for a long moment, firelight playing across his face, and Clara felt something shift in the air between them. Something she couldn't name but could definitely feel, pulling tight like a bowstring. No, he said finally. That's not all. Before she could ask what he meant, he stood and moved to check on his horse. The moment broke, whatever it had been, and Clara was left sitting by the fire with her heart beating too fast and questions piling up in her head. The temperature was dropping fast now, the desert's heat bleeding away into the endless sky. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to shiver. Her dress, what was left of it, wasn't meant for nights in the open. Kael noticed. Of course he noticed. He seemed to notice everything. He pulled a blanket from his pack and tossed it to her. You should sleep. We'll move before dawn. Where are we going? Your land. The ranch. Clara's stomach dropped. I can't go back there. That's the first place Garrett will look. I know. Then why? Because running won't solve this, Kael said, his voice quiet but firm. And you can't keep running forever. Eventually, you have to stand. Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're hunting. No, he agreed. But I'm the one between them and you now, and I don't move. The words settled over her like a promise, or a threat, depending on who you were. Clara pulled the blanket around her shoulders, rough wool that smelled like smoke and horse and something else, something that was just Kael. I don't understand you, she whispered. You don't have to. He settled on the other side of the fire, his back against a rock, rifle within easy reach. His eyes were already scanning the darkness beyond their small circle of light, alert for any movement. Clara lay down, pulling the blanket tight, but sleep felt impossible. Her mind was racing, replaying the day, the wedding that wasn't, the run, the horse falling, Garrett's men getting closer and closer, and then Kael, appearing like something out of a fever dream. Kael? Yes. Thank you for... She couldn't finish the sentence. For saving me, for not leaving me, for caring when you had no reason to. Sleep, Clara. She closed her eyes, listening to the fire pop and hiss, to the wind moving through the grass, to the steady rhythm of Kael's breathing across from her. And despite everything, the fear, the exhaustion, the impossibility of it all, she felt something she hadn't felt in months. Safe. Just for tonight. In this small circle of firelight, with a stranger who'd chosen to help her, she felt safe. Tomorrow would bring its own problems. Tomorrow they'd have to face Garrett and his men and whatever came next. But tonight, she could sleep. Clara woke to the smell of rain. Her eyes snapped open, disoriented. The sky was still dark, but different, heavy with clouds that hadn't been there when she'd fallen asleep. The fire had burned down to coals, giving off barely any light. Kael was standing at the edge of their shelter, perfectly still, watching the horizon. What is it? Clara pushed herself upright, the blanket falling from her shoulders. Storm coming. As if summoned by his words, lightning flickered in the distance, silent and blue-white. Thunder followed seconds later, a low rumble that Clara felt in her chest. "We need to move," Kyle said, already gathering their supplies. "In the dark? In a storm? Better than being caught in a flash flood." He handed her the water skin. "Drink, then we ride." Clara did as she was told, her hands shaking slightly. She'd seen prairie storms before. They came on fast and mean, turning dry creek beds into raging rivers in minutes. But she'd always watched them from inside, from safety. Kyle saddled the horse with practiced speed, his movements sure even in the near darkness. Clara helped where she could, mostly just trying to stay out of his way. The wind was picking up now, bringing the smell of rain and electricity. "Where will we go?" she asked as he swung up into the saddle. "Higher ground." He reached down. "Come on." She grabbed his hand and let him pull her up. The horse shifted beneath them, nervous, feeling the storm approach. Kyle steadied it with a touch, a quiet word Clara couldn't hear over the rising wind. They'd barely cleared the rocks when the rain hit. It came all at once, a wall of water that soaked through Clara's dress in seconds. She pressed against Kyle's back, trying to shield herself from the worst of it, but there was no escaping this kind of rain. It was everywhere, cold and driving, turning the world into a blur. Lightning cracked overhead, close enough that Clara could smell the ozone. Thunder followed immediately, so loud it seemed to shake the ground. The horse spooked, dancing sideways, but Kyle kept it under control, his hands steady on the reins. They climbed, the horse struggling for purchase on ground that was already turning to mud. Clara couldn't see where they were going, could barely see anything beyond Kyle's shoulders, but she felt the incline, felt the horse's muscles bunching with effort. Another flash of lightning, and for one frozen moment Clara saw the landscape spread out below them, a network of gullies and washes already starting to fill with rushing water. If they'd stayed where they were, they'd have been swept away. "Hold on!" Kale shouted over the storm. Clara tightened her grip, her fingers digging into his sides. The horse surged forward, cresting a rise, and then they were on more solid ground, rock instead of mud. Kale guided them toward another outcropping, this one deeper, offering more protection from the rain. He dismounted and helped Clara down, his hands firm on her waist. They were both soaked through, water streaming down their faces, but at least here the worst of the rain couldn't reach them. Kyle led the horse deeper into the shelter, speaking to it in a language Clara didn't know. Apache, probably. The animal calmed under his touch, his voice. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, shivering violently now. The temperature had dropped even further, and her wet dress clung to her like ice. "We can't have a fire," Kyle said, reading her thoughts. "Too much wind, and we need to stay dark." "In case they're out there." "In case they're out there," he confirmed. He pulled something from his pack, another blanket, this one treated with something that had kept it dry. He draped it over her shoulders, then wrapped his own around himself. They sat side by side against the rock wall, listening to the storm rage outside their small shelter. Lightning continued to strobe across the sky, each flash painting the world in stark whites and deep blacks. Thunder rolled, almost constant now. "Do you think they gave up?" Clara asked, her teeth chattering. "No." "You don't even have to think about it?" Cale looked at her, his face shadowed. "Men like that don't give up, especially not when their boss wants something." "Garrett always gets what he wants." "Not this time." The certainty in his voice again, that absolute conviction. Clara wanted to believe it, wanted to trust that this stranger could somehow stand between her and a man who'd swallowed half the county. "You don't know him," she said. "Don't know what he's capable of." "I know men, I know power, and I know fear." Kyle shifted, pulling the blanket tighter. "He uses all three. That's not strength, that's just leverage." Leverage that works, until it doesn't. Another flash of lightning, and in its brief light Clara saw Cale's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the set of his mouth, the way he held himself even now, even exhausted and soaked and hunted. He looked like something carved from the land itself, hard and unyielding. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked quietly. "I told you." "No. The real reason." Cale was silent for a long moment. The storm filled the space between them, thunder and rain and wind. "I had a sister," he said finally, so quietly she almost didn't hear him. "Younger. Her name was Kai." Clara's breath caught. The past tense landed like a stone. "She was taken," Cale continued, his voice empty of emotion in a way that was worse than anger, "by white men from a settlement. They wanted—" He stopped, his jaw working. "It doesn't matter what they wanted. What matters is no one helped her. No one stood between her and them. Cale, I found her 3 days later." His hands had curled into fists, Clara noticed. Too late. Always too late. The silence after his words felt heavy, weighted with grief and rage, and things Clara couldn't begin to understand. She wanted to say something, offer some comfort, but what could she possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow? "I'm sorry," she whispered, because it was all she had. Kyle nodded once, stiffly. "So when I see a woman running, bruised, with men hunting her—" He looked at her directly. "I don't walk away, not anymore." Clara's throat tightened. "I'm not your sister." "No, but you're someone's daughter, someone's—" He stopped. "You matter, whether you know it or not." The words hit her harder than they should have. When was the last time someone had said that to her? That she mattered beyond what she could provide, beyond her land or her name or her usefulness? She found herself leaning closer to him, drawn by something she didn't quite understand. The warmth of him, maybe, or the steadiness, or just the simple fact that he'd chosen to help when no one else would. "I matter," she repeated, testing the words. "Yes." "And you're going to help me stand against Garrett?" "Yes." "Even though you don't know me, even though this isn't your fight." Kyle turned to look at her fully, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. "It became my fight the moment I pulled you onto this horse," he said. The storm raged on outside, but in their small shelter, something else was building. Clara could feel it, electric as the lightning, pulling between them like gravity. She should move away, should put distance between herself and this complicated stranger who turned her escape into something else entirely. She didn't move. "Kyle," she started, not sure what she was going to say. He reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull back. His hand touched her cheek, rough calluses against her skin, his thumb brushing over the split in her lip with unexpected gentleness. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. "I can see it." "I don't feel strong. I feel—" Her voice cracked. "I feel terrified." Fear and strength aren't opposites. Sometimes they're the same thing. His hand was still on her face, and Clara found herself leaning into it without thinking, craving the warmth, the contact, the proof that she wasn't alone in this. When was the last time someone had touched her with kindness instead of violence? When had anyone looked at her and seen something worth protecting instead of something to own? "We should sleep," Kyle said, but he didn't move his hand. "Dawn comes early." "I don't think I can sleep." "Try anyway. You'll need your strength tomorrow." Reluctantly, he pulled back, and Clara felt the loss of his touch like cold water. She lay down, pulling the blanket around herself, hyper-aware of Kyle settling beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, far enough to be respectful. The storm continued its assault on the prairie, but inside their shelter, wrapped in scratchy wool with a stranger who'd become something more, Clara finally felt her eyes growing heavy. Just before sleep took her, she felt Cale shift slightly closer, his warmth pressing against her back through the layers of blanket. "I won't let them touch you," he murmured, so quietly she might have dreamed it. "That's a promise." And despite everything, despite Garrett and his men and the impossible situation she was in, Clara believed him. She slept. Dawn came gray and cold, the storm having wrung itself out some time before first light. Clara woke to find Kyle already up, checking the horse's hooves one by one, his movements methodical in the thin morning light. The world looked scrubbed clean, every rock and blade of grass sharp-edged and dripping. She sat up, her body protesting every movement. Sleeping on stone hadn't done her any favors, and the damp had settled into her bones. Her dress was still wet, clinging uncomfortably, and she was pretty sure she looked like something the prairie had chewed up and spit out. Cale glanced over. How do you feel? Like I got trampled by a horse and left for dead. Close enough? He moved to his pack, pulled out another strip of dried meat. Eat. We're riding hard today. Clara took the food, forcing herself to chew even though her stomach was twisted in knots. You really think going back to my ranch is the right move? It's the only move that ends this. Or gets us both killed. Maybe. He checked his rifle, the motion casual, like he was discussing the weather. But you can't run forever, Clara, and they know every place you might hide around here. Your land, at least you know the terrain, know the buildings, the sight lines, where to make a stand if it comes to that. When it comes to that, Clara corrected. You mean when? Kael didn't argue. They ate quickly, neither speaking much. The silence between them had changed overnight, less awkward, more comfortable, like they'd settled into some kind of understanding. Clara found herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, taking in the efficient way he moved, the constant awareness in his eyes. He'd saved her life yesterday. Would probably have to do it again before this was over. The thought should have terrified her. Somehow it didn't. Ready? Kael asked, finishing with the saddle. Clara stood, her legs shaky but holding. As I'll ever be. He swung up onto the horse and reached down. She took his hand, his grip familiar now, solid, and let him pull her up behind him. The warmth of him seeped through her wet dress, and she found herself pressing closer than strictly necessary, telling herself it was just for warmth. They rode south as the sun climbed, burning off the last of the clouds. The land transformed as they went, the endless grass giving way to rockier terrain, scattered juniper and pinyon pine appearing in the draws and washes. Clara recognized it, felt something in her chest tighten with each familiar landmark. How far? Kael asked. Maybe 2 hours if we keep this pace. There's a ridge up ahead. Once we're over that, you can see the ranch house in the valley. And Garrett's land? North of mine. Our properties share about 3 miles of fence line. Or they did. She paused. I don't know what he's done since I ran. Might have just claimed the whole thing already. Not legally. Clara laughed, bitter. You think Garrett cares about legal? No, but other people do. And he has to maintain the appearance of legitimacy, or the whole thing falls apart. Kael guided the horse around a cluster of rocks. Men like him, they need everyone to believe the lie. That's their weakness. You seem to know a lot about men like him. I've known plenty. Something in his tone made Clara wonder what he'd seen, what he'd survived. But before she could ask, Kael went still, his hand dropping to the rifle across his lap. What? Clara whispered. Riders. 2 of them. Northeast. About a mile out. Clara strained to see what he was seeing, but all she caught was a distant dust plume. How can you tell it's riders? The way the dust moves. And I can hear them if I listen. She fell silent, trying to hear what he heard, but all she caught was wind and the steady rhythm of their own horses' hooves. Kael's senses were sharper than hers, tuned to threats she couldn't even perceive. Are they coming this way? Not yet. They're searching a grid pattern, methodical. He adjusted their course slightly, angling more west. We'll circle around. Stay downwind. Downwind? They might have dogs. Clara's stomach dropped. Garrett has hounds, uses them for hunting. Then we stay off the high ground and keep moving. They rode in tense silence, Clara hyper-aware of every sound, every shift in the wind. Once she thought she heard baying in the distance, but it might have been her imagination. Kael's body was coiled tight in front of her, ready to move fast if he had to. The sun climbed higher, baking the moisture from the land. Clara's dress was finally starting to dry, going stiff with salt and dirt. She must smell terrible. Probably looked worse. But vanity seemed pretty stupid when you were running for your life. They crested a low rise and Kael pulled up short. What? Clara asked, then saw it. Smoke, thin and gray, rising from somewhere in the valley ahead. That's my land, Clara said, her throat tight. That smoke's coming from my ranch. Kael studied it, his face unreadable. Could be a cooking fire. Could be Garrett burning me out. Only one way to know. He kicked the horse forward, faster now, and Clara held on as they descended into the valley. The smoke grew thicker as they got closer, and Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. Everything she had left in the world was in that ranch house. Her mother's things, her father's books, the only home she'd ever known. If Garrett had burned it just to spite her. They came around a stand of cottonwoods, and the ranch opened up before them. The house was still standing, Clara saw with relief. The smoke was coming from the barn, or what was left of it. The old structure was mostly collapsed, still smoldering, black timbers jutting up like broken teeth. "Stay here," Kyle said, starting to dismount. "Like hell." Clara slid down before he could stop her. "That's my home. And you'll be no use to it dead." "Then come with me." They moved forward together, Kyle with his rifle ready, Clara wishing desperately for a weapon of her own. The ranch yard was eerily quiet, no chickens clucking, no sound from the horses that should have been in the corral. Everything felt wrong. The front door of the house hung open, swinging slightly in the breeze. Kyle caught her arm before she could rush forward. "Slow. Let me check it first." "I'm not hiding while you—" "I'm not asking you to hide. I'm asking you to be smart." His eyes met hers, hard but not unkind. 2 minutes. Give me 2 minutes to clear the house. Then you can come in." Clara wanted to argue, but he was already moving, low and fast, disappearing through the door. She counted in her head, each second stretching. The barn continued to smoke, the smell of burned wood heavy in the air. Everything her father had built, worked for, died protecting. And Garrett was tearing it apart piece by piece. Kyle reappeared in the doorway. "It's clear, but you need to see this." Clara's stomach knotted as she followed him inside. The house had been ransacked, drawers pulled out, furniture overturned, her mother's china shattered across the floor. Someone had gone through every room, searching for something or just destroying for the sake of it. In the kitchen, words were scrawled across the wall in what looked like charcoal, "Come home." Clara's hands curled into fists. "Bastard." "They were looking for something," Kyle said, studying the destruction. "Papers, maybe. Deeds." "The deeds in the county office." "Copies, then. Contracts. Anything that proves ownership." He moved through the debris, careful where he stepped. "What did your father keep here?" Clara tried to think past her anger. "His office is upstairs. He had files, records of water rights, and grazing contracts. And there was a strongbox under the floorboards in his bedroom." "Show me." They climbed the stairs, Clara's heart sinking with each step. Her father's office looked like a tornado had hit it. Papers everywhere, the desk broken, books torn from their shelves. But when she went to his bedroom and checked the loose board, the strongbox was still there. She pulled it out, hands shaking. The lock had been forced, the lid bent. But when she opened it, empty, she breathed. What should have been in there? Money? Not much, but enough. And a letter. Claire stared at the empty box. "My father wrote me a letter before he died. Told me to read it if anything ever happened to him." "What did it say?" "I don't know. I never got to read it." Her voice cracked. "It was sealed. I was saving it, didn't want to think about, and now it's gone." Kyle crouched beside her. Maybe that's what they were really after. Not money. Information. "What kind of information?" "The kind that proves Garrett killed your father." The words hung in the air between them. Clara had thought it, suspected it, but hearing it said out loud made it real in a way that terrified her. "You think my father knew," she said slowly. "Knew Garrett was planning something and wrote it down. I think your father was a smart man who didn't trust his neighbor, and I think that letter might have been the proof you needed." Cale stood, offering her his hand. "But without it, it's just my word against Garrett's." Clara let him pull her up, feeling defeated. "And nobody's going to believe me. Then we make them believe." "How?" Before Cale could answer, a sound carried across the yard. Hoofbeats, multiple horses, coming fast. They moved to the window. 3 riders were approaching from the north, and Clara recognized the lead horse immediately. "That's Silas," she said, her mouth going dry. "Garrett's foreman." Cale checked his rifle. "The other 2? "Billy Crane and Dutch, the ones from yesterday." "Then they didn't give up." "I told you they wouldn't." The riders pulled up in the yard, Silas dismounting with the easy confidence of a man on his own territory. He was tall and lean, with a weathered face and cold eyes that had always made Clara's skin crawl. The other two stayed mounted, flanking him. "Miss Clara," Silas called out, his voice carrying, "I know you're in there. Saw the horse." Kael moved away from the window. "Stay back." "What are you going to do?" "Talk to them." "Kael, they'll kill you." He looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. "They can try." Before she could stop him, he was moving down the stairs. Clara rushed after him, her heart in her throat. Kael walked out the front door like he owned the place, rifle held loosely in one hand. The three men turned to face him, Silas's expression shifting from confident to wary in an instant. "Who the hell are you?" Silas demanded. "Someone who doesn't like uninvited guests." Kyle's voice was level, almost casual. "You're on private property. This is Garrett Moss's land now." "Funny, I don't see his name on the deed." Silas's hand drifted toward his pistol. "That's going to change real soon as Miss Clara comes to her senses and accepts his proposal." "She already gave her answer," Kyle said. "I believe it was hell no." Billy Crane snorted from his horse. "And who are you, Savage? Her new pet?" The word hung in the air like a slap. Clara saw Kyle's jaw tighten, but his voice stayed calm when he spoke. "I'm the man standing between you and her. That's all you need to know." "Well then," Silas smiled, cold and mean. "Guess we got a problem. See, Mr. Moss wants his bride back. And what Mr. Moss wants, Mr. Moss gets." "Not today." "You really think you can stop 3 armed men?" "I know I can." The certainty in Kyle's voice made Silas hesitate. Clara could see him reassessing, trying to figure out if this Apache warrior was bluffing or if he really was dangerous enough to back up his words. "Mr. Moss is a patient man," Silas said finally. "But his patience ain't infinite. Miss Clara comes back with us now, willingly, or we come back with more men and take her by force. And anyone standing in our way—" He let the threat hang. "Then come back," Kael said, "with as many men as you want. The answer will be the same." Clara stepped out onto the porch before she could think better of it. All 3 men's eyes snapped to her, and she saw Silas's expression shift to something uglier. "Miss Clara," he said, his voice going soft in a way that made her skin crawl. "Mr. Moss is worried sick about you, running off like that, disappearing into the prairie. You could have died out there." "I'd rather die free than marry Garrett Moss." "Now that's just crazy talk. Mr. Moss is offering you everything: security, protection, a good life. What more could a woman want?" "How about a choice?" Clara's voice shook, but she forced herself to keep talking. "How about not being hunted down like an animal? How about keeping the land my father died for?" "Your father's dead, Miss Clara, and this ranch is too much for a woman alone. You need a man to run it. Need Mr. Moss." "I don't need anyone. That Savage teaching you to talk back?" Silas's eyes slid to Kyle, calculating. "Mr. Moss ain't gonna like that. Ain't gonna like it at all." "I don't care what Garrett likes." Silas's face hardened. "You're making a mistake, Miss Clara. A big one. And when Mr. Moss runs out of patience, and he will, ain't nothing gonna protect you. Not this ranch, not your daddy's memory, and sure as hell not some Apache who's probably just waiting for a chance to—" "Finish that sentence," Kyle said quietly, "and you won't leave this yard breathing." The air went electric. Billy and Dutch both reached for their guns, but Silas held up a hand, stopping them. "Easy now," Silas said, though his eyes never left Kyle. "We're all civilized folks here. No need for violence. Then leave." "We're leaving, but we'll be back." Silas swung back up onto his horse, still watching Kyle with the wariness of a man who'd recognized a predator. "Tell Miss Clara to think real hard about her choices. Mr. Moss is offering her a way out of this mess. Last chance before things get ugly." "They're already ugly," Clara said. Silas smiled, showing teeth. "Honey, you ain't seen ugly yet." He wheeled his horse around and the 3 of them rode out, kicking up dust. Clara and Cale stood in the yard, watching until they disappeared over the ridge. "Well," Clara said, her voice shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "That went great." "They're scared." "They didn't look scared." "Silas was." Cale lowered his rifle. "That's why he left. He wasn't sure he could take me. and he wasn't willing to find out in front of his men. But he'll come back. Yes. With more men. Yes. Clara wrapped her arms around herself, staring at the burned barn, the ransacked house, the land her father had loved. I can't fight an army, Kyle. I can barely shoot straight. Then I'll teach you. She laughed, sharp and bitter. In what? The 2 hours before they come back? We have more time than that. Silas will report to Garrett, and Garrett will make a plan. He's not impulsive. You said so yourself. He'll think this through, decide how to handle it. Kyle started walking toward the barn, which gives us time to prepare. Prepare how? You see this place? It's destroyed. The house still stands, the well still works, and you know this land better than they do. He turned to face her. That's leverage. Not enough. Maybe not, but it's what we have. Clara followed him to the barn, picking through the charred remains. Most of it was gone, but the tack room had partially survived. Her father's old saddle was smoke-damaged but intact. A few tools, some rope. They burned it to send a message, Clara said. Garrett wants me to know he can take everything. So don't let him. You make it sound simple. It is simple. Not easy, but simple. Kyle pulled a coil of rope free from the debris. You stand. You fight. You refuse to break. Everything else is just details. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to have his certainty, his calm in the face of impossible odds. But she'd lived here her whole life, knew how power worked in this county, and it didn't work in favor of women who said no. My father tried to stand up to Garrett, she said quietly. He died. Your father stood alone. And I'm not alone because I have you? Clara shook her head. You're one man, KL. One man against Garrett's money and men and influence. How long before they... She stopped, the thought too terrible to finish. KL stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I'm not your father, Clara, and I don't die easy. Everyone dies eventually. Maybe, but not today. He reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle, intimate, and it made Clara's breath catch. I told you last night, I won't let them touch you. That's not changing. Why? The question came out as barely a whisper. Why do you care so much? Cale's hand lingered near her face, and for a moment Clara thought he might kiss her. Her heart hammered, caught between wanting and fear, and the dizzy feeling of standing too close to the edge of something. But he pulled back, his expression shuddering. Because someone should, he said simply. It wasn't the answer she'd expected, or maybe the one she'd wanted, but it was honest. Clara could hear it in his voice, see it in the way he looked at her, like she mattered, like her life had value beyond what she owned or who she married. When was the last time anyone had looked at her like that? Okay, she said, making a decision. Okay. So we stand. We fight. What's the plan? Something that might have been approval flickered in Kael's eyes. First, we secure the house. Board up the windows on the lower floor, clear sight lines. Second, we inventory what weapons and ammunition you have. Third, we pray Garrett doesn't send his whole crew. Third, Kael continued, we make sure you can shoot well enough to defend yourself if I'm not there. The casual way he said it, if I'm not there, made Clara's stomach clench. You planning on going somewhere? Planning for every possibility. He started walking back toward the house. Come on, daylight's burning. They worked through the afternoon, Kael directing with the efficiency of someone who'd prepared for battle before. They found boards in what was left of the barn and nailed them over the ground floor windows, leaving narrow gaps to see and shoot through. The house slowly transformed into something that looked like a fort. Clara's father had kept a shotgun and a rifle in his office, both of which had somehow survived the ransacking. Kael cleaned them methodically, checking the actions, counting the ammunition. Not much, he said, looking at the pile of shells and cartridges, but enough if we're smart. Define enough. Enough to make them think twice. They set up positions, corners of rooms with good sight lines to the yard, places where one person could hold against multiple attackers. Kael moved through the house like he was studying a map, seeing angles and possibilities Clara had never noticed. You've done this before, she said, watching him work. What makes you say that? The way you think, like you're always 3 steps ahead. Cale didn't answer immediately. He was testing the stability of a bookshelf, seeing if it could be tipped as a makeshift barricade. When you grow up the way I did, he said finally, you learn to think ahead. Or you don't grow up at all. What was it like, growing up? He glanced at her, something unreadable in his eyes. Different than yours. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. It's not. Clara let it drop. Whatever Kyle's past held, he'd share it when he was ready, if he was ever ready. Some wounds were too deep to talk about. They worked in silence after that, falling into a rhythm. Clara found herself sneaking glances at him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way he moved, controlled and precise. The scars she could see on his hands, his forearms, evidence of a hard life, a violent one probably, but he wore it without complaint. As the sun started its slide toward evening, Kyle called a halt. You need to learn to shoot properly, he said, picking up her father's rifle. Come on. They went out behind the house where her father used to practice. Cale set up targets, cans and bottles scavenged from the wreckage, and handed her the rifle. You've shot before? Some. My father taught me when I was young, but I was never very good. Show me. Clara settled the rifle against her shoulder, aimed at the nearest can, and fired. The recoil knocked her back a step and the shot went wide, kicking up dust 3 feet from the target. Your stance is wrong, Cale said, moving behind her. And you're tensing up before you pull the trigger. The gun knows. The gun knows? Knows you're afraid of it. Here. He adjusted her feet, widening her stance. His hands were warm through her dress, professional but somehow intimate. Plant yourself like a tree. Root down. Clara tried to focus on the target and not on how close he was standing. Now breathe, Kyle said, his voice low near her ear. In, out. On the exhale, squeeze, don't pull. The shot should almost surprise you. She breathed, felt her heartbeat steady, and squeezed. The rifle cracked and the can jumped, hit. Better, Kyle said. They practiced until the light started to fail, until Clara's shoulder ached from the recoil and her ears rang from the shots. But she was hitting more than she was missing now, and some small part of her felt stronger for it. As they walked back to the house, Kyle carrying the rifle, Clara found herself speaking without planning to. Thank you. For what? For not treating me like I'm fragile. For teaching me instead of just protecting me. Kyle looked at her, really looked at her, and Clara felt heat rise in her face. You're not fragile, he said. Scared, maybe, but not fragile. There's a difference. They stood there in the fading light, something passing between them that Clara couldn't quite name. Want, maybe. Or recognition. The sense that they were both damaged in their own ways, both running from something, both trying to figure out how to stand. Kyle, she started. We should get inside, he interrupted, his voice rougher than before. Dark's coming, and I want to... He stopped mid-sentence, his whole body going still. What? Clara whispered. Riders, he breathed, coming fast, from the north. Clara strained to hear it and caught the distant thunder of hoofbeats. More than 3 this time. More than 5. They were out of time. Cale grabbed her hand and they ran for the house, his grip iron tight on hers. They made it inside and Kyle immediately started securing doors, checking windows, his movement sharp with urgency. How many? Clara asked, her voice shaking. At least 8. Maybe more. He handed her the shotgun. You remember what I taught you? Yes. Good. Because you're about to get a real test. Outside, the hoofbeats grew louder. Clara moved to the window, peering through the gap in the boards. Dark shapes were forming in the twilight, riders circling the house like wolves around wounded prey. And in the front, on a massive black horse, sat a man Clara recognized even in silhouette. Garrett Moss had come for his bride. Garrett Moss sat his horse like a king, surveying conquered territory. The dying light catching the silver conchos on his saddle, the polished leather of his boots. Even from a distance, Clara could feel the weight of his presence, the absolute certainty of a man who'd never been told no and meant it. Behind him, spread in a loose semicircle, at least 10 riders waited. Clara recognized some of them. Ranch hands from Garrett's crew, a few men from town who owed him money or favors, all armed, all watching the house with the patience of men who knew they had time on their side. "Clara!" Garrett's voice carried across the yard, smooth and reasonable, like he was calling her to dinner. "Clara, sweetheart, I know you can hear me. Come on out now. Let's talk about this like civilized people." Kyle was at the window across the room, his rifle trained on the yard. "Don't answer him. He knows I'm here. Let him wonder." But Garrett wasn't wondering. He urged his horse forward a few steps, still well out of rifle range, his hands spread wide in a gesture of peace. "I'm disappointed in you, Clara. Running off on our wedding day, disappearing into the prairie like some wild thing. You had me worried sick." He paused, letting that sink in. "But I understand. You're grieving. Your father's death, that was hard on you, makes people do irrational things." Clara's hands tightened on the shotgun. "So I'm willing to forget this little tantrum," Garrett continued, his tone magnanimous. "You come out now, we'll go back to town, have a proper ceremony. Small and private, just how you wanted. We'll say you were visiting family, got delayed by the storm. Nobody needs to know about your lapse in judgment." "He's good," Cale murmured, making it sound like he's doing you a favor. "That's Garrett, always the reasonable one." Claire's voice was bitter. "Right up until he's not." "I've even brought the preacher," Garrett called out. "Reverend Michaels rode all the way out here just for you. We can settle this tonight, Clara. Make it official. Then all this unpleasantness can be behind us." One of the riders shifted, and Clara caught a glimpse of white collar. Garrett really had brought a preacher, like this was just another business transaction to be closed. "And your companion," Garrett's voice took on an edge now. "The Apache. I'm willing to overlook that indiscretion as well. Clearly he took advantage of a woman in distress. But he'll need to leave, now, before I lose my patience." Cale's jaw tightened, but he didn't move from his position. "You hear me, Savage?" Garrett's voice hardened. "You've got one chance to ride out of here breathing. Take it." "Interesting," Cale said quietly. "He's more afraid than he's letting on." "How can you tell?" "He's trying to split us up. Get me to leave, then you're alone and vulnerable. If he was confident, he'd just take what he wanted." Clara looked at the men surrounding the house. "There's 10 of them, Kyle. Maybe more. We can't—" "Miss Clara!" A new voice, this one cracking with fear. The preacher stepping forward on unsteady legs. "Miss Clara, please. I don't want anyone getting hurt. Mr. Moss just wants to help you, wants to give you a good home, security—" "Shut up, Michaels," Garrett snapped, and the preacher fell silent immediately. So much for the gentle approach. Garrett swung down from his horse, his movements deliberate. In the fading light, Clara could see him clearly now. Tall and broad-shouldered, his face handsome in that well-fed way rich men had. He'd always seemed larger than life, even when her father was alive. Now, standing in her yard like he owned it, he looked like exactly what he was, a predator who'd spotted wounded prey. "I'm done being patient, Clara." Garrett's voice dropped the reasonable tone, showing the steel underneath. "You've embarrassed me, made me look like a fool in front of the whole county. I don't appreciate that." "Good," Clara said, loud enough for him to hear. Garrett's head snapped toward the window where her voice came from. "So she does have a tongue. I was starting to think your Apache friend was doing all your talking now." "Leave," Clara called out. "This is my land, my home. You're not welcome here." "Your land?" Garrett laughed, the sound ugly. "Your father's land, you mean, and he's dead. Which makes you, what, a woman alone trying to run 1,200 acres? That's not realistic, Clara. You need a man." "I don't need you." "You don't have a choice." The mask was slipping now, anger bleeding through. "Your father's debts." "What debts? He didn't owe anyone anything. Came due when he died. Money owed to the bank, to suppliers, to me for services rendered. It's all documented, all legal. You want to keep this ranch? You marry me. Simple as that." Clara's stomach turned. "You forged papers." "I protected my investments. There's a difference." Garrett took another step closer. "Now stop this foolishness and come out, or I'll come in and get you." "Try it." Cale's voice cut through the gathering dark, calm and cold as winter stone. "See what happens." Garrett's eyes found the window where Kyle was positioned. "You're a dead man, Apache. You just don't know it yet." "Men have been telling me that my whole life. I'm still here." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other across the distance, and Clara could feel the violence coiling between them like a living thing. Then Garrett smiled. "Silas," he said, not taking his eyes off the house. "Burn them out." Clara's heart stopped. "No." But Silas was already moving, along with two other riders. They circled toward the barn, torches suddenly appearing in their hands, the flames bright against the coming night. "They're going to burn the house," Clara breathed, "with us inside." "No, they're not." Cale shifted his rifle, tracking Silas. "Because I'm going to kill the first man who lights a torch." "Kyle, trust me." The rifle cracked, and Silas's torch exploded in his hand, sparks showering everywhere. He yelped and dropped it, his horse shying violently. "Next one goes through your chest," Cale's voice carried across the yard, hard as iron. "Your choice, Silas." Silas looked to Garrett, who'd gone very still. "You think you can get all of us before we get you?" Garrett called out. "You might take down 2, maybe 3, but there's 10 of us. You do the math." "I can count," Kale replied. "Question is, which 3 of your men want to die first? Because I guarantee you won't be one of them. Men like you never lead from the front." Garrett's face darkened, but he didn't move closer. "You're just delaying the inevitable," he said. "Sun's almost down. Once it's full dark, my men will surround this house and you won't see them coming. By morning, you'll both be dead or in chains. So I'll make you one last offer, Apache. Walk away now. I'll even let you keep your horse, your weapons. You leave Clara to me. This doesn't have to be your fight." "Already told you," Kyle said. "I don't walk away." "Then you'll die here." "Maybe. But I'll take plenty of you with me, starting with anyone who gets within 100 yards of this house." Garrett studied the darkening windows, calculating. Claire could almost see his mind working, weighing options, costs. He was a businessman at heart, used to buying and selling, not to actual fighting. The fact that Kyle wasn't backing down, wasn't negotiating, was throwing off his whole approach. "You know what I think?" Garrett said finally. "I think you're bluffing. I think you've got maybe 20 rounds of ammunition in that house, and you're hoping I'll believe you're some kind of warrior ghost who can hold off an army." He turned to his men. "Spread out. Surround the house. Anyone tries to leave, shoot to wound. I want them alive." The riders began to move, peeling off in different directions. Clara's breath came quick and shallow as she watched them disappear into the gathering shadows. "We're trapped," she said. "No, they are." Kyle moved away from the window. "How well do you know this house?" "I grew up here. Why?" "Root cellar? Back door? Any way out they might not be watching?" Clara's mind raced. "There's a cellar door on the east side. Hasn't been used in years. My father kept meaning to fix the stairs, but never got around to it. It probably doesn't even open anymore." "Show me." They moved through the dark house, Clara leading the way by memory. The cellar entrance was in the kitchen, hidden under a worn rug. Kyle pulled it aside and tested the door. It opened with a groan of protesting hinges, revealing stairs that descended into absolute blackness. "Where does it go?" Kyle asked. "Straight down about 8 feet, then there's a root cellar, maybe 10 by 12. The outside entrance is on the east wall, should open into the yard." "Should?" "Last time I was down there was 5 years ago. The door was stuck even then." Kyle considered this. "If I can get it open, how much cover between the door and the tree line?" "Maybe 30 yards. But Kyle, if you go out there, I'm not leaving you, but I need to know our options." He closed the cellar door, his face grim in the near darkness. "If it comes to it, you go down there and you run. Don't look back. Don't wait for me. Just run." "I'm not leaving you either." "Clara, no!" She grabbed his arm, surprised by her own vehemence. "You don't get to save me and then die for it. That's not how this works." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or something deeper. His hand came up to cover hers where it gripped his arm. "I told you," he said quietly. "I don't die easy." "Everyone dies, Kale. You said that yourself." "Not today." Before she could respond, glass shattered somewhere upstairs. Clara jumped, and Kale immediately pushed her behind him, rifle coming up. Another crash, then another. They were throwing rocks, Clara realized, breaking windows, trying to create openings, or maybe just trying to terrorize them. They're testing us, Kael said, seeing if we'll panic. It's working. More glass breaking, this time from multiple directions. Then voices shouting to each other in the dark. Got the back covered. East side's clear. No movement in the house. They were coordinating, Clara realized, setting up a perimeter, making sure there was no escape. Garrett might not be a fighter himself, but he knew how to manage men, how to organize an operation. Kyle, she whispered, what do we do? Before he could answer, Garrett's voice rang out again. I'm getting bored, Clara, and when I get bored, my men get creative. A pause. Billy, show her what creative looks like. A bottle arced through the broken window, trailing fire. It smashed against the far wall, and suddenly flames were spreading across the floor, hungry and bright. Clara screamed, grabbing for a blanket to beat them out, but Kael was already moving. He grabbed the water bucket they'd filled earlier and doused the flames before they could really catch. Smoke filled the room, acrid and choking. That was just a sample, Garrett called out, laughing now. Next one goes through the upstairs window. Then we'll see how long you hold out. More bottles flew, more fires started. Kael moved like lightning, putting them out one by one, but they were running out of water, running out of time. The smoke was getting thicker, and Clara could hear men laughing outside, enjoying the show. The cellar, Kael said, coughing. Now. But now, Clara. She stumbled toward the kitchen, Kael right behind her. He threw open the cellar door and practically pushed her down the stairs. She caught herself on the railing, splinters biting into her palm, and descended into the darkness. The cellar was exactly as she remembered, musty and close, smelling of earth and old vegetables. She could barely see, just vague shapes in the blackness. Behind her she heard Kael descending, his boots sure on the stairs despite the lack of light. The outside door, he said. Where? Clara groped her way across the cellar, hands outstretched, until she found the opposite wall. The door should be here, somewhere. Her fingers found wood, swollen with moisture and age. She pushed, but it didn't budge. It's stuck, she gasped. Kael was beside her instantly. Move! She stepped aside and heard him brace himself. Then he hit the door with his shoulder, hard, once, twice. On the third impact, something cracked and the door burst outward, letting in cool night air and starlight. Kael grabbed her hand. Come on! They emerged into the yard on the east side of the house, away from where most of Garrett's men were positioned. But not far enough, Clara heard a shout almost immediately. There! They're running! Gunshots cracked the night, bullets whining past Clara's head. She ran, Kael pulling her toward the tree line, his grip iron strong on her hand. More shots, closer now. Something tugged at her dress and she realized how close death was. Inches away, seconds away. They hit the trees and Kael yanked her down behind a boulder. Clara's lungs burned, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break her ribs. How many? She gasped. 3 following us. Maybe 4. Kael was scanning the darkness, his rifle ready. The rest are still at the house. They'll burn it down. Let them. You're more important than wood and stone. More shouts from behind them, getting closer. Kael touched her shoulder. When I move, you run. Straight east, stay low. Don't stop. What are you going to do? Buy you time. Kael, no! But he was already gone, melting into the shadows like he'd never been there at all. Clara crouched behind the boulder, alone in the dark, listening to men crashing through the brush somewhere close by. Where'd they go? Can't see shit in these trees. Spread out. They can't have gone far. A scream cut through the night, suddenly there and then suddenly gone. Silence followed, heavy and terrible. Billy? A voice called out, shaking now. Billy? That you? Another sound, wet and final. Another scream, choked off. Jesus Christ! The third man never finished his sentence. Clara heard bodies hitting the ground, heard the other men shouting in panic, and then nothing but wind in the branches. Kael emerged from the darkness like a ghost, not even breathing hard. Blood on his knife, on his hands. Come on, he said, his voice utterly calm. We need to move. Clara stared at him, at the blood. at this man who'd just killed 3 people in the time it took her heart to beat 20 times. How did you— Later, move! They ran deeper into the trees, Clara's legs shaking so badly she thought she might fall. Behind them, more shouts, more confusion, Garrett's voice rising above the chaos, demanding to know what happened. Kael led her through the darkness with impossible certainty, never stumbling, never hesitating. It was like he could see in the dark, or maybe he'd just spent so much of his life running that he didn't need to see anymore. They came out in a small canyon, narrow and steep-sided. A creek ran through the bottom, barely more than a trickle this time of year. Kael pulled Clara into a crevice in the rock wall, out of sight from above. "We'll rest here," he said quietly. "Catch our breath." Clara slid down the rock wall, her legs finally giving out. She was shaking all over, shock setting in. Kael crouched beside her, wiping his knife clean on his pants. "You killed them," Clara whispered. "Yes. Just like that. 3 men. They were hunting you. They would have killed you without hesitation." His voice was matter-of-fact, like they were discussing the weather. "I gave them more of a chance than they deserved." Clara wrapped her arms around herself, trying to process what she'd just witnessed. She'd known Kael was dangerous, had seen it in the way he moved, the way he carried himself. But knowing and seeing were different things. "Does it bother you?" she asked. "Killing." Kael was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "It should. And maybe once it did. But I've done it enough times now that it's just—" He stopped, searching for words. "It's just what you do to survive, to protect what matters." "And I matter?" He looked at her directly, his eyes catching what little starlight filtered into the canyon. "Yes." The word hung between them, simple and absolute. Clara felt something shift in her chest, some wall she'd been holding up crumbling under the weight of everything that had happened. "Why?" Her voice cracked. "You don't know me. Don't owe me anything. You could have left me to die in that prairie and nobody would have blamed you. I would have blamed me. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Kael shifted, sitting beside her against the rock wall. "Maybe I'm tired of walking away. Maybe I've seen too many people die who shouldn't have. Or maybe—" He paused. "Maybe you reminded me that not everything in this world is broken." Clara let out a sound between a laugh and a sob. "I'm definitely broken. No, bent, maybe, scared, but not broken." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Broken people don't run. They don't fight. They just stop. And you haven't stopped." His hand was warm, solid, real. Clara held onto it like an anchor. Above them, she could hear voices. Garrett's men, spreading out, searching. But they sounded distant, confused. Without light, without Kael's ability to read the land, they were just stumbling in the dark. "They'll find us eventually," Clara said. "Maybe, but not tonight." "And tomorrow?" "Tomorrow we end this." Clara turned to look at him, though she could barely see his face in the shadows. "How? It's just us against all of them. Against Garrett and his money, and his forged papers, and his fear," Kael interrupted quietly. "That's what we use. His fear. Garrett's not afraid of anything. Everyone's afraid of something. Garrett's afraid of losing control, of looking weak, of people seeing through his carefully built reputation." Kael's voice was thoughtful. "That's why he wants to marry you, not for love, but for the land and to prove he can take whatever he wants. And that's his weakness." Clara tried to follow his logic, but exhaustion was clouding her mind. "I don't understand." "You will. But right now you need to rest. We both do." He was right. Clara could barely keep her eyes open, the adrenaline finally draining away and leaving her empty. She leaned against Kael's shoulder without thinking about it, felt him shift to support her weight. "Just for a minute," she murmured. "As long as you need." The last thing Clara registered before sleep took her was the steady rhythm of Kael's breathing, the solid warmth of him beside her, and the impossible feeling that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. When she woke, gray pre-dawn light was filtering into the canyon, and Kael was gone. Clara jolted upright, panic spiking through her. But then she heard movement and saw him emerging from the shadows, his arms full of something. "You're awake," he said, keeping his voice low. "Good. Where did you go?" "Scouting." Garrett pulled his men back to the ranch house. "They're camped in your yard, waiting for daylight." Clara stood, her body protesting every movement. "And then? And then they'll come looking for us." Kyle set down what he'd been carrying, weapons, Clara realized, rifles and pistols and ammunition belts. "But I found their supply wagon." "You stole their guns." "They won't need them." There was something in his voice that made Clara's stomach clench. "What did you do?" What needed doing? He handed her a rifle, a better one than her father's old gun. "Can you shoot this?" "I can try." "That'll have to be good enough." Cale checked his own weapons with practiced efficiency. "We're going back." "Back? To the house? That's insane." "That's exactly why it'll work. They won't expect it." Clara stared at him, trying to see if he was joking, but his face was serious, already planning, already 3 steps ahead like he always was. "There's still at least 6 or 7 of them, Kael, and only 2 of us." 6 against 2, he agreed. "Better odds than 3 against 1. When were the odds 3 against 1? "When I killed those men in the trees." He looked at her, something fierce in his eyes. "You asked me once why I'm doing this. The truth. I'm tired, Clara. Tired of running, tired of watching bad men win because good people are too scared to stand. So I'm standing, whether you're with me or not." Clara's hands tightened on the rifle. Every instinct she had screamed at her to run, to get as far from this place as possible. But where would she run to? Garrett owned half the county, had men everywhere. And even if she escaped, what then? Spend the rest of her life looking over her shoulder, waiting for him to find her? "I'm with you," she heard herself say. Cale nodded like he'd never doubted it. "Then let's go get your home back." They moved through the canyon as the sun broke over the horizon, painting the rocks in shades of copper and gold. Clara followed Kyle's lead, trying to step where he stepped. Stay quiet. Like he stayed quiet, her heart hammered against her ribs, but her hands were steady on the rifle. They circled wide, coming at the ranch house from the north. Cale paused at the edge of the tree line, studying the scene. The house was still standing, Clara saw with relief, though smoke-stained and damaged. Garrett's men had made camp in the yard, a fire burning, horses picketed nearby. 7 men, Cale counted quietly, plus Garrett. Silas is there and Dutch. The others I don't recognize. "What's the plan?" "We split them up, make them panic, turn their numbers into a disadvantage." "How?" Cale smiled, and there was something almost feral in it. "By making them think there's more of us than there are." He moved before Clara could ask what he meant, disappearing into the brush. She waited, her palms sweating on the rifle stock, watching the camp. A gunshot cracked from the west, and one of Garrett's men went down, clutching his leg. Shouts erupted, men scrambling for weapons. Another shot from the east, a different direction entirely, and another man fell. "We're surrounded," someone yelled. "How many are there?" "I don't know. Multiple shooters." Chaos. Garrett was shouting orders, but his men were panicking, firing randomly into the trees. Kyle had turned their advantage, their numbers, into a liability. They were shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition, hitting nothing. Clara saw her chance. She raised her rifle, aimed at the man closest to the horses, and fired. The recoil knocked her back a step, but the shot was true. The man went down, and the horses spooked, breaking their picket line and scattering. More confusion. Men running after horses, trying to maintain defensive positions, shooting at anything that moved. Kyle appeared beside Clara so suddenly she nearly screamed. "Now we push." He moved forward, and Clara followed, both of them firing methodically. Another man down. Another. The morning air filled with gunsmoke and shouting and the smell of fear. Silas was the first to break, Clara saw with grim satisfaction. He ran for the trees, abandoning his position. 2 others followed. "Stand your ground," Garrett roared. "They're just 2 people. Stand and fight." But his men had had enough. They'd signed up for easy money, not a real battle. Not against an enemy they couldn't see, who moved like ghosts, who killed with cold precision. Within minutes, only Garrett and Dutch remained, both of them backed against the house. Dutch's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold his rifle. Kyle and Clara emerged from the trees, walking toward them with weapons raised. The sun was fully up now, throwing everything into sharp relief. Garrett saw them, and his face went pale, then red with rage. "You!" he spat at Kyle. "You did this! You ruined everything!" "No," Kyle said calmly. "You did that yourself, by thinking you could take what wasn't yours. This land should have been mine. I worked for it, planned for it. You killed for it," Clara interrupted, her voice stronger than she'd ever heard it. "You killed my father." "I didn't." Garrett stopped, seeming to realize the admission he'd almost made. "You can't prove anything." "Maybe not, but everyone will know anyway." Clara stepped closer, the rifle still trained on him. "The story's already out there, Garrett, about how you tried to force me into marriage, how you burned my barn, ransacked my house, how your men hunted me across the prairie like an animal. Nobody will believe you." "They will when I tell them," Kyle said. "Every detail, every threat, every crime. And unlike you, I don't lie." Garrett's eyes darted between them, looking for an escape, an angle, finding none. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Yes, it is," Clara said. "Drop your weapons, both of you." Dutch dropped his rifle immediately, hands up. Garrett hesitated, then slowly lowered his pistol. "Now get on your horse," Clara continued, "and ride back to your ranch, back to town. I don't care. But you leave my land and you don't come back. The debts are fake and you know it, but I'll fight them anyway. In court, in front of witnesses, in front of the whole county if I have to." Clara's voice was steel now. "And if you come after me again, Kyle won't be as merciful as he was today." Garrett looked at Kyle, at the blood still staining his hands, at the bodies of his men scattered around the yard. Something in his face crumbled, the mask finally slipping completely. "You've made an enemy," he said quietly, "one with resources, connections." "Good," Clara interrupted. "At least now the fight's in the open." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Garrett turned and walked toward where some of the horses had stopped running, Dutch scrambling after him. They mounted up, Garrett's movement stiff with rage and humiliation. He looked back once, his eyes promising retribution. Clara raised her rifle in response. Garrett rode away. The silence after Garrett rode away felt heavier than gunfire. Clara stood in her ravaged yard, the rifle still in her hands, watching the dust settle where his horse had disappeared over the ridge. Her whole body was shaking now that the adrenaline was draining away, leaving nothing but exhaustion and the slow, creeping realization of what they'd just done. They'd won. Or had they? "He'll come back," she said, her voice hollow. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he'll come back. Men like Garrett don't just give up." Cale was checking the wounded men Garrett had left behind, 2 still breathing, 1 already gone. He worked with clinical efficiency, binding wounds with strips torn from their own shirts, his face showing nothing. "Maybe," he said without looking up, "but not soon. He lost too many men, too much pride. He'll need time to regroup, to figure out how to spin this. Spin it how? He attacked me in my own home. And you fought back with the help of a savage who killed his men." Cale's voice was flat. "That's how he'll tell it. Make himself the victim. Make you the aggressor." Clara's stomach turned because she knew he was right. Garrett would paint this however served him best, and people would believe it because they always believed men with money and power. Then what was the point? She gestured at the destruction around them, the burned barn, the bullet-scarred house, the bodies. What did we win? Kyle finally looked at her, and something in his eyes made her breath catch. Time. Space to breathe, proof that you can stand. He stood, wiping his hands. "That's not nothing, Clara. It didn't feel like enough. But maybe it was all they were going to get." The morning sun climbed higher, heating the blood-soaked ground. Clara forced herself to move, to lower the rifle, to take stock of what was left. The house still stood. That was something. The well hadn't been poisoned. The corrals were damaged but could be repaired. Her father's land. Her land now, bought with violence and terror and the blood of men she'd helped kill. The thought made her stomach heave. She stumbled to the side of the house and was sick, her body purging everything until there was nothing left but dry heaves and shame. Kael appeared beside her, offering a canteen. She took it with shaking hands, rinsed her mouth, spit. "First time's the hardest," he said quietly. "First time what?" "Seeing men die because of choices you made." Clara looked at him, really looked. In the harsh morning light, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight he carried. "Does it get easier?" "No, you just get better at carrying it." She didn't know if that was comforting or terrifying, maybe both. They worked through the morning in near silence, Kael dragging the bodies to a respectful distance while Clara tried to salvage what she could from the house. Most of her mother's things were destroyed. The china shattered, the quilts torn and trampled. But she found a few photographs intact, her parents' wedding picture, some of her father's books. Small things. But they mattered. By noon, they'd done what they could. The wounded men had been left with water and basic supplies. Kael's mercy, though Clara suspected they didn't deserve it. They'd ride out when they could, or die trying. Either way, it wasn't her problem anymore. Kael built a small fire in the yard away from the house, and they sat beside it even though the day was already hot. Clara couldn't shake the chill that had settled into her bones. "What now?" she asked. Kael was silent for a long moment, staring into the flames. "That depends on you." "On me?" "This is your land, your fight. I helped you stand, but staying—" He paused. "That's your choice." Something cold gripped Clara's chest. "You're leaving." "I didn't say that." "You're thinking it." Kael looked at her, his expression unreadable. "I'm thinking that I don't belong here, that sooner or later people will come, the sheriff maybe, or men from town, and they'll ask questions. They'll see an Apache warrior and a white woman, and they'll draw their own conclusions. Let them. Clara, see, let them think whatever they want. I don't care." She was surprised by the vehemence in her own voice. "You saved my life. Multiple times. You stood with me when everyone else either ran or tried to destroy me. So if people want to talk, if they want to judge, they can go to hell." A ghost of a smile touched Kael's mouth. "That's the spirit that's going to get you through this." "That's the spirit you gave me." Clara moved closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. "You said I'm not broken. Maybe I wasn't before you, but I was getting there. Garrett was wearing me down, piece by piece, and I was letting him because I didn't know how to fight back. You showed me how." "You knew, you just needed to remember." "Then help me keep remembering." Her hand found his, rough calluses against her palm. "Stay, at least for a while. Help me rebuild what Garrett tore down. Help me figure out how to keep fighting." Kael's fingers tightened on hers. "You know what people will say." "I know what they'll say. I'm saying I don't care. They'll call you a whore. Say you're sleeping with a savage, that you've lost your mind, that you're dishonoring your father's memory. My father taught me to stand up for what's right, for what I believe in." Clara's voice was steady now. "And I believe in you. In this. In us. Whatever that means." The last words hung between them, vulnerable and exposed. Clara half expected Kael to pull away, to retreat behind that wall of controlled distance he wore like armor. But instead, he lifted his free hand to her face, his thumb brushing over her split lip with impossible gentleness. "I told you," he said quietly. "I don't walk away. Not from fights. And not from—" He stopped, something flickering in his eyes. "Not from you." The space between them felt electric. Clara's heart hammered, her breath shallow, and she was suddenly hyper-aware of everything, the warmth of his hand on her face, the way he was looking at her like she was something precious and dangerous all at once, the magnetic pull drawing them together. "Kael?" she whispered, not sure what she was asking for, but he knew. His other hand came up to frame her face, and then he was kissing her, gentle at first, almost tentative, like he was afraid she might break. Clara made a sound low in her throat and leaned into him, her hands fisting in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something urgent and desperate and real. All the fear and violence and terror of the past days burned away in the heat between them, leaving only this, Two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and chosen to hold on. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kyle rested his forehead against hers. "This is complicated," he said. "Everything worth having is complicated. They'll make your life hell for this. They're already trying. At least this way I'll have something worth fighting for." Cale pulled back enough to look at her properly, his hands still framing her face. "You're sure about this? About me?" Clara thought about it, really thought about it, about what it would mean to stand beside an Apache warrior in a world that would hate them for it, about the judgment and the gossip and the very real danger it would put them both in, about how much easier it would be to let him go, to face the future alone and safe in the shell of respectability. Then she thought about the way he'd appeared when she was dying in the prairie, the way he'd taught her to shoot, to stand, to fight, the way he'd killed for her without hesitation, and the way he looked at her now, like she was strong enough to handle the truth, brave enough to make her own choices. "I'm sure," she said. Something in Cale's expression shifted, softened, became almost vulnerable. "I can't promise you easy, can't promise safety or comfort or any of the things a proper husband would—" Clara kissed him again, hard and fast, cutting off the words. When she pulled back, she was smiling. "Did I ask for any of that?" "No," he admitted. "Then stop trying to talk me out of this." She stood, pulling him up with her. "Now come on. We have work to do if we're going to make this place livable again." They spent the afternoon in exhausting, sweaty labor. Cale proved to be surprisingly good at carpentry, rigging temporary repairs to the broken windows and doors with materials scavenged from the barn. Clara cleaned what could be cleaned, threw out what couldn't, slowly reclaiming her home from the destruction Garrett's men had wrought. It felt good to work with her hands, to create instead of destroy. And having Cale there, solid and steady, made the impossible task feel almost manageable. As the sun started its slide toward evening, they took a break, sitting on the porch steps with water and the dried meat from Cale's supplies. Clara's muscles screamed, her hands were blistered, and she couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this bone-tired. But she also couldn't remember the last time she'd felt this alive. "Tell me about your sister," she said suddenly. Kyle went still beside her. For a long moment, Clara thought he wouldn't answer, that she'd pushed too far, but then he spoke, his voice quiet. "Kai. She was younger than me by 3 years. Laughed all the time, drove our mother crazy with it." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. "She wanted to be a healer, learned all the plants, all the remedies, said she was going to save everyone." "What happened to her?" The smile disappeared. "White men from a settlement. They raided our camp, took her and 2 other girls. By the time we tracked them down," his jaw worked. "The others were already dead. Kai was still breathing, but barely. She died in my arms." Clara's throat tightened. "How old were you?" 17. Just a boy, she thought. Just a boy forced to become a killer, a protector, a man before he was ready. "The men who took her," she asked carefully. "What happened to them?" "I killed them." Cale's voice was flat, emotionless. "All of them. Took me 2 years, but I hunted down every single one and I killed them." The matter-of-fact way he said it should have terrified Clara. Instead, she found herself moving closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Good," she said quietly. Cale's arm came around her, pulling her against his side. They sat like that as the sun set. 2 people carrying their own weight of violence and loss, finding something like peace in each other's presence. "After Kai died," Cale said eventually, "I couldn't go back. Couldn't face my mother, my people. Couldn't be around anyone who reminded me of what I'd failed to protect. So I left. Been moving ever since. Until now." "Until now," he agreed. Clara lifted her head to look at him. "You know you didn't fail her, right? You were 17, you did everything you could." "I know that in my head," Cale interrupted gently, "but knowing and feeling are different things. I spent years thinking if I'd been faster, smarter, better, I could have saved her. And that anger, that guilt, it's still there. Probably always will be. So you save other people instead. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just trying to outrun the ghosts. How's that working out?" Cale looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression made Clara's breath catch. "Better lately," he said. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell, the sky turning purple and then black, stars emerging one by one. Clara thought about everything that had happened in the past days, running from her wedding, nearly dying in the prairie, the storm, the siege, the violence. How quickly her entire world had been torn apart and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. And somehow, impossibly, she felt more herself than she had in years. "I'm scared," she admitted quietly, "of what comes next, of Garrett coming back, of the town turning against me, of losing this place, losing you, losing everything I've fought for." "That's natural. You don't seem scared of anything." "I'm terrified," Kael said simply. "All the time. Fear's how you stay alive out here. It's when you stop being scared that you make mistakes." Clara turned that over in her mind. "So you just live with it? You learn to use it. Fear tells you when something matters, when the stakes are real. The trick is not letting it control you." He paused. "You're doing better at that than you think." "I don't feel like I am." "You stood up to Garrett, shot his men, fought for your home, all while being more terrified than you've ever been." Kael's hand found hers in the darkness. "That's not weakness, Clara. That's courage." The word settled over her like a blanket. Maybe he was right. Maybe courage wasn't the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward anyway, to stand even when your knees were shaking. A coyote called somewhere in the distance, long and mournful. The sound made Clara shiver, reminded her of just how alone they were out here, how exposed. "We should get inside, what?" Kael said, reading her thoughts. "Post-watch in case Garrett gets brave." They moved inside, Kael securing the makeshift repairs while Clara lit a lantern. The house felt different now, scarred but standing, damaged but still home. She wondered if that's how she felt too. Kael positioned himself by the window with the best view of the yard, his rifle across his lap. Clara started to prepare some semblance of a meal from the supplies they had left, then stopped. "I don't even know what your favorite food is," she said suddenly, "or where you've been before this, or what you do when you're not fighting for your life." Kael looked over at her, surprised. "Those are the questions you want answered right now?" "Well, if we're—" She gestured between them, feeling her face heat. "Whatever this is, I should know something about you beyond the fact that you're very good at killing people." That ghost of a smile again. "Fair enough. Favorite food? Anything with honey? I've got a weakness for it." "Honey? My mother used to make these little cakes with wild honey and cornmeal. Haven't had them in years, but I still think about them." Clara filed that away, already planning. If there were any bees in the area, she'd find them, get honey somehow, make those cakes for him. "Where have I been?" Kael continued. "All over. New Mexico Territory, Colorado. Even up into Wyoming once. Moved around, took work where I could find it, tracking, scouting, sometimes hunting. Never stayed anywhere long." "And when you're not fighting for your life?" "I carve." He pulled something from his pocket, a small piece of wood partially shaped into what looked like a bird. "Passes the time, keeps my hands busy." Clara moved closer, taking the carving gently. It was beautiful, detailed, the kind of work that required patience and skill. "This is amazing." "It's not finished." "It's still amazing." She handed it back. "What else?" "What do you think about when you're alone?" Kael was quiet for a moment, his thumb rubbing over the wooden bird. "Lately, you." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Claire's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Me?" "Whether you'd make it, whether I could actually help you, or if I was just delaying the inevitable." He looked up at her. "Whether you'd let me stay even if I wanted to." "And now that you know the answer?" "Now I'm wondering what comes next, how we build something here that lasts." His eyes were intense in the lamplight. "If that's even possible." Clara moved to sit beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I don't know if it's possible, but I want to try. It won't be easy." "You keep saying that, like I'm expecting easy." She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. "Kael, my life has never been easy. My mother died when I was 12. My father worked himself to the bone trying to keep this ranch running. I've spent the last 3 months watching Garrett systematically destroy everything I love. Easy isn't what I'm looking for. Then what are you looking for? Clara thought about it, really thought about it. What did she want from this complicated, dangerous, impossible situation? Truth, she said finally. Someone who sees me as I actually am, not as what they want me to be. Someone who doesn't lie to me or try to protect me from reality, even when it's ugly. Someone who... She squeezed his hand. Someone who makes me want to be braver than I am. Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he lifted their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, the gesture so tender it made Clara's throat tight. I can do that, he said quietly. They sat together in the lamplight, keeping watch, talking in low voices about everything and nothing. Kael told her about the places he'd been, the things he'd seen. Clara told him about her childhood on the ranch, about her father's dreams for the land, about the mother she barely remembered but missed every day. Slowly, in the wreckage of her home, they built something new. Not perfect, not easy, but real. Somewhere past midnight, Clara's eyes started to droop. Kael noticed immediately. Sleep, he said. I'll keep watch. You need to sleep too. I will. Later. First watch is mine. Clara wanted to argue, but exhaustion was dragging at her like a physical weight. She made a makeshift bed from salvaged blankets, lying down where she could still see Kael's silhouette by the window. Kael? She murmured, half asleep already. Yes? Thank you for everything. You already thanked me. No, I mean, she struggled to find the words. For seeing me, for helping me remember who I am under all the fear, for making me believe I could fight. She heard him shift, felt him move closer. His hand touched her hair, gentle. You were always a fighter, Clara. I just gave you permission to show it. She drifted off with his hand still in her hair, feeling safer than she had any right to feel in a damaged house surrounded by enemies. But Kael was there, watching over her, and for tonight at least, that was enough. When she woke, gray dawn light was filtering through the boarded windows and Kael was still at his post, still watching. He looked exhausted, she noticed, dark circles under his eyes, but alert. Did you sleep at all? She asked, sitting up. A little. Liar. Maybe. He stretched, his spine popping. But we're still alive and the house is still standing, so I'm calling it a win. Clara stood, every muscle protesting. She moved to the window beside him, looking out at the yard. No sign of Garrett or his men, just empty prairie and the promise of another hot day. What do we do now? She asked. Now? Kael looked at her, something almost like hope in his eyes. Now we start rebuilding. The barn, the corrals, your life. And we do it right this time, on your terms. Our terms, Clara corrected. Our terms, he agreed. They stood together as the sun rose, battered and exhausted and still standing. The fight wasn't over, Clara knew that. Garrett would come back, or the town would turn on them, or 100 other disasters would rain down. The world didn't forgive women who chose their own path, and it definitely didn't forgive them for choosing men like Kael. But for the first time in longer than she could remember, Clara wasn't afraid of what came next. Whatever it was, they'd face it together. And that made all the difference. 3 days passed in backbreaking work and uneasy peace. Clara and Kael rebuilt what they could, replacing boards, clearing debris, salvaging what remained of her father's possessions. The physical labor helped, gave her something to focus on besides the constant waiting for Garrett's next move, because he would make one. Clara felt it in her bones, in the way the wind seemed to hold its breath, in the 2 quiet mornings when no riders appeared on the horizon. On the 4th day, the waiting ended. Clara was working on the corral fence when she heard it, the rumble of many horses coming fast from the north. Her hands froze on the hammer, her stomach dropping. Kael was beside her in seconds, rifle already in hand. How many? I don't know, a lot. They moved to the house, taking positions by the windows. But as the riders crested the ridge, Clara's breath caught. It wasn't just Garrett's men. The sheriff was there too, his badge catching the sunlight. And behind him at least 15 men from town. The mayor, the banker, several ranchers Clara recognized. This wasn't a raid. This was official. They're coming for you, Clara said, her voice tight. Kyle, they'll arrest you for killing those men. They'll hang you. Maybe. His face was calm, resigned. Or maybe they're coming for both of us. The riders pulled up in the yard, fanning out in a loose formation. The sheriff dismounted, a big man with gray in his beard and eyes that had seen too much. Behind him, Garrett sat his horse with a satisfied smirk, like he'd already won. Miss Vance, the sheriff called out. This is Sheriff Barnes. I need you to come out here, unarmed, so we can talk like reasonable folks. Clara looked at Kyle. He shook his head slightly. Don't trust them. But what choice did they have? They couldn't fight the whole town. I'm coming out, Clara called back. She set down her rifle, ignoring Kyle's sharp intake of breath. Alone, my companion stays inside. Now, Miss Vance, that's not going to work. I got serious accusations here against that Apache you're harboring. He needs to come out too. What accusations? Murder, for starters. Assault. Destruction of property. Mr. Moss here says... Mr. Moss is a liar, Clara interrupted, her voice carrying across the yard. He attacked my home. Tried to burn me out. His men hunted me like an animal. Cale defended me. That's all he did. Garrett leaned forward in his saddle. That's not how I recall it, sweetheart. Way I remember, you ran off on our wedding day with this savage. When I came to check on you, to make sure you were safe, he ambushed my men, killed 3 of them in cold blood. That's not what happened. You got any witnesses says different? The sheriff's voice was almost sympathetic. Because I got 6 of Mr. Moss's men willing to testify they were peacefully searching for you when they were attacked. Clara's hands curled into fists. Of course, Garrett's men would lie for him. They were on his payroll, terrified of him, or both. Sheriff, I'm willing to come in and talk, Clara said, choosing her words carefully. Tell you everything that happened, on record, in front of witnesses. But I'm not handing Cale over to Garrett's justice. We both know what that means. Nobody's talking about Garrett's justice. This is the law, Miss Vance, territory law. Your friend killed 3 men to save my life, and that needs to be addressed proper-like. He comes in peaceful, gets a fair trial. We sort this all out civilized. Barnes paused. Or he doesn't come peaceful, and we have to do this the hard way. Cale appeared in the doorway then, startling everyone. He walked out slowly, hands visible and empty, his rifle left behind. No, Clara breathed. Kyle, don't. It's okay. His voice was quiet, meant just for her. This was always coming. They'll hang you. Maybe. Or maybe the truth actually matters. He looked at her, something fierce and tender in his eyes. Either way, I'm not letting them drag you out of here like a criminal. You've done nothing wrong. The sheriff was watching them carefully, his hand resting on his pistol. Smart man. Now, you're going to come with us nice and easy, no trouble. Miss Vance, you'll need to come too. Give your statement. I'm not leaving him. Wasn't asking, ma'am. You're both needed in town. Barnes's voice hardened. And before you get any ideas about running, we got men posted all around. You try to bolt, someone's going to get hurt, and I'd rather that didn't happen. Garrett was smiling now, openly triumphant. See, Clara? This is what happens when you choose poorly. When you align yourself with the wrong sort. If you just accepted my proposal like a sensible woman, none of this would have been necessary. Go to hell, Garrett. His smile widened. After you. They were given horses, Clara on a borrowed mare, Kyle with his hands bound in front of him on his own paint. The indignity of it made Clara's blood boil, but Kyle's face remained impassive, giving nothing away. The ride to town took 3 hours, every minute of it torture. Clara kept trying to catch Kyle's eye, to communicate something, hope, defiance, anything. But he stared straight ahead, locked in his own thoughts. The town looked exactly as Clara remembered from her childhood visits, a single main street lined with false front buildings, a church at one end, the saloon at the other. People stopped what they were doing to stare as the procession rode through, whispers following in their wake. That's the Vance girl, someone said. Took up with an Apache, heard tell. Shame, her father'd be spinning in his grave. Clara kept her head high, refusing to show how much the words cut. Let them talk. Let them judge. She knew the truth. They stopped outside the sheriff's office, a squat building with barred windows. Barnes dismounted and gestured to his deputies. Take the Apache inside. Lock him up proper. Wait, Clara said, sliding off her horse. Sheriff, please, let me talk to him first. Just 1 minute. Barnes studied her, then sighed. 1 minute, but make it quick. Clara rushed to Kyle's side as they pulled him down from his horse. Up close, she could see the tension in his jaw, the way his hands had gone white-knuckled from the rope. I'll get you out of this, she whispered. I'll find a lawyer. I'll testify. Clara, he cut her off gently. Listen to me. Whatever happens, you don't compromise yourself to save me. You understand? You tell the truth, and you let the pieces fall where they fall. But I know what they'll do. I've always known. His eyes held hers. But I'd make the same choices again. All of them, including you. Her throat tightened. That's not fair. No, it's not. But it's honest. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. Remember what I taught you. Stand firm. Don't let them make you doubt yourself. And Clara, he paused, don't let Garrett win, no matter what happens to me. Before she could respond, the deputies were pulling him away, dragging him toward the jail. Clara watched them lock him in a cell, the iron door clanging shut with a finality that made her stomach turn. Your turn, Miss Vance, Barnes said, not unkindly. Let's go talk in my office. The sheriff's office was small and cluttered, papers stacked everywhere, a map of the territory on one wall. Barnes gestured to a chair across from his desk, and Clara sat, her back rigid. Now then, Barnes said, pulling out a ledger. I need your account of what happened, start to finish. And Miss Vance, I'll know if you're lying. So Clara told him. Everything. Running from the wedding, nearly dying in the prairie, Cale saving her. The ride back to the ranch, Garrett's threats, the siege. She didn't embellish, didn't leave anything out. Just laid it bare and watched Barnes's face for any sign of whether he believed her. When she finished, Barnes was quiet for a long time, tapping his pencil against the desk. That's quite a story, he said finally. It's the truth. Maybe. But truth's a funny thing, Miss Vance. Mr. Moss tells a different version, says you were hysterical, running from a perfectly reasonable marriage proposal. Says the Apache took advantage of your confused state, turned you against your own people. Says when Mr. Moss came to rescue you, the Apache attacked without provocation. And you believe him? I believe Mr. Moss is a respected member of this community, a man of means and standing, whereas you're a young woman who just lost her father, clearly not in her right mind. Barnes's voice was almost pitying. And the Apache, well, he's Apache, not exactly known for truthfulness, are they? Rage flooded Clara's system, hot and blinding. So that's it? Garrett's word against mine, and mine doesn't count because I'm a woman, and Kyle's doesn't count because he's not white? Now don't go putting words in my mouth. Then tell me I'm wrong. Clara leaned forward, her voice shaking. Tell me this is actually about justice, and not about Garrett Moss getting what he wants because he has money and power and friends in the right places. Barnes's face hardened. You're upset. I understand that. But you need to watch your tone, young lady. I'm trying to help you here. By locking up the man who saved my life? By preventing this from getting uglier than it already is. Barnes stood, moving to look out the window. Here's how I see it. You go back to your ranch, marry Mr. Moss like you should have done in the first place. He's willing to forgive this whole incident, calls it grief-induced temporary insanity. Forgive? Clara couldn't even finish the sentence, the words choking her. In return, he'll drop the charges against the Apache. Man gets escorted to the territorial border, told never to come back. You get your life back. He keeps his life. Everyone wins. Except I lose my freedom, and Kyle loses everything. Kyle. Barnes turned, eyebrow raised. You're on a first-name basis with him now? Miss Vance, do you understand how this looks? A white woman, unmarried, keeping company with an Apache warrior? The scandal alone? I don't care about the scandal. Well, you should, because reputation's all a woman has in this world, and you're throwing yours away for what? A savage who'll be dead or gone in a week anyway. The casual cruelty of it hit Clara like a physical blow. This was how they saw Kyle, as disposable, as less than human, as something to be removed and forgotten. And this was how they saw her, as property to be managed, as someone whose choices didn't matter because she was just a woman who couldn't possibly know her own mind. "I want a lawyer," Clara said, her voice cold. "For both of us." "Miss Vance, I want a lawyer. That's my right, isn't it? Or does territory law not apply to women either?" Barnes's jaw tightened. "There's one lawyer in town, name's Patterson, but he works for Mr. Moss, so I don't think he'll be much help to you." Of course he did. Of course Garrett had thought of everything, locked down every avenue of escape before he'd even made his move. "Then I'll send for one from Santa Fe. Or Albuquerque, somewhere." Clara stood, her legs shaky but holding. "Until then, I'm not saying another word without legal representation. And neither is Kyle. You're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good. Because it shouldn't be easy to railroad innocent people." Barnes stared at her for a long moment, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Then he shook his head. "You can stay at the boarding house. Mrs. Chen's place, 2 streets over. I'll send word when we're ready to proceed." He paused at the door. "And Miss Vance? For what it's worth, I hope you're right about that Apache. Because if you're wrong, if he's been using you this whole time, you're going to feel mighty foolish when the truth comes out." Clara didn't dignify that with a response. The boarding house was clean and spare. Mrs. Chen, a tiny woman who asked no questions, and showed Clara to a small room with a window overlooking the street. Left alone, Clara finally let herself break down, the tears coming hot and fast. She'd failed. Failed Kyle, failed herself. Let them separate them, lock him up like an animal. And now she was trapped in this town, surrounded by people who'd already decided how this story ended, with no power and no options. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "When you've got no good choices, make the least bad one and live with it." Clara wiped her eyes, her jaw setting. Fine. She'd make a choice then, but it wouldn't be the one they expected. She waited until dark, until the town had settled into sleep. Then she slipped out of the boarding house, keeping to the shadows, moving toward the sheriff's office. The night deputy was young, barely 20, and he startled when Clara appeared at the door. "Miss Vance, you shouldn't be. I need to see the prisoner, just 5 minutes. Please." She let her voice shake, playing the frightened woman card she hated. "I need to talk to him, need to understand why he did this to me." The deputy hesitated. "Sheriff said no visitors." "Sheriff doesn't need to know." Clara pulled a bill from her pocket, one of the few she'd salvaged from the house. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking." Greed and youth won out. The deputy pocketed the money and led her back to the cells. Kyle was sitting on the narrow cot, his eyes closed, but they opened as soon as Clara approached. He was on his feet immediately, moving to the bars. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly. "I know, but I needed to see you." Clara glanced at the deputy, who'd moved back to give them privacy. She lowered her voice. "Kyle, I'm getting you out of here." "Clara, don't argue. I have a plan." "Whatever you're thinking, stop thinking it. They'll arrest you too." "I don't care." "I do." His hands came through the bars, reaching for hers. "Listen to me. You go back to that boarding house. Tomorrow morning, you tell them you'll marry Garrett." Clara jerked back like he'd slapped her. "What? You marry him? Get me released. Then once I'm clear—" "No, absolutely not. Clara, it's the only way. It's not." Her voice rose and she forced it back down. "I won't do it, Kyle. I won't give Garrett what he wants, won't let him win. There has to be another way." "There isn't. You've tried everything else." "Then I'll try harder." Clara gripped the bars, her knuckles white. "I'll find that lawyer in Santa Fe. I'll make enough noise that the territorial governor hears about this. You'll get yourself killed." Cale's voice was gentle but firm. "Garrett won't let you keep fighting. He'll have you declared incompetent, lock you up somewhere, or worse. At least if you marry him, you're alive. You can wait him out, outlive him, inherit everything when he dies. And what about you?" "I'll be fine. I've survived worse." "Liar." Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. "You're asking me to save myself by letting them destroy you. That's not surviving, Kyle. That's just a different kind of dying." He pulled her closer to the bars, close enough that she could feel his breath on her face. Then tell me what you want me to do, he said quietly. Because I'm out of options here. I'm locked in a cell, facing a judge who's probably in Garrett's pocket, with no witnesses and no evidence except the bodies of 3 dead men. This isn't a fight I can win with violence. So tell me how we win it at all. Clara's mind raced, desperate, searching for the angle she was missing. There had to be something, some leverage they hadn't considered. Then it hit her. The letter, she breathed. What letter? The one my father wrote. The one they stole from the strongbox. Clara's pulse was racing now. Garrett took it because it had evidence in it, proof of what he'd done. If we could find it, it's probably destroyed by now. Maybe, but maybe not. Garrett's smart. He'd want to keep it, use it as insurance, make sure nobody could prove anything, even if they suspected. Clara gripped his hands tighter. Cale, if we could get that letter, if we could prove Garrett killed my father, forged those debt papers, everything changes, Cale finished, understanding dawning in his eyes. But Clara, how would you even get it? Garrett's ranch is 10 miles from here, probably guarded, and you'd have to know where to look. His office. He keeps important papers in his office. I've been there before with my father. Clara's mind was working fast now, piecing together a plan. If I could get in there, you can't, it's too dangerous. So was facing down his men at my ranch, so was everything we've already done. Clara leaned closer. You said I was stronger than I thought. Time to prove it. Cale looked at her for a long moment, conflict clear on his face. Then, slowly, he nodded. If you're going to do this, you do it smart. Wait until tomorrow when everyone's at the trial. Garrett will be in town, his men too. The ranch will be mostly empty. What trial? Mine. Judge is coming through tomorrow, Barnes said. They're fast-tracking this. His mouth twisted. Garrett wants it over quick before anyone can ask too many questions. Tomorrow. Less than 24 hours. Time's up, Miss Vance, the deputy called out. Clara squeezed Kael's hands one last time. Don't give up. Not yet. I won't if you won't. She forced herself to walk away, to leave him locked in that cell. But her mind was already racing ahead, planning, calculating risks. Back in her room, Clara didn't sleep. She paced, working through every detail of what she had to do. Getting to the Moss Ranch. Getting inside. Finding the letter. Getting out again without being caught. Any one of those steps could fail catastrophically. But doing nothing meant watching Kael hang and losing everything to Garrett. That wasn't acceptable. When dawn broke gray and cold, Clara was already dressed and ready. She went downstairs to find Mrs. Chen in the kitchen. I need a horse, Clara said without preamble. To rent or borrow. I'll pay whatever you ask. Mrs. Chen studied her with shrewd eyes. For what purpose? I need to get home. To my ranch. There's something I forgot. Something important. The lie came easily, smooth. I'll be back before nightfall. You'll miss the trial. I know. Mrs. Chen was quiet for a moment, then nodded. My son has a horse. Good, steady animal. He'll rent it to you for $3. Expensive, but Clara didn't argue. She paid and was on the road within the hour, her heart hammering against her ribs. The ride to the Moss Ranch took 2 hours of hard riding. Clara approached from the east, staying low, using the terrain for cover. Just as Kael had predicted, the place was mostly deserted. Most of Garrett's men would be in town for the trial, either to testify or just to watch. The ranch house was enormous, twice the size of Clara's family home. All new lumber and fresh paint, money on display. Money on power made visible. Clara tied her horse in a copse of trees a quarter-mile out and moved in on foot. Her heart was in her throat, every shadow making her jump, but she forced herself to move slowly, carefully, watching for guards. She spotted one, an older man dozing in a chair on the porch. Not much of a threat, but she'd still have to get past him to reach Garrett's office. Clara circled to the back of the house, testing windows until she found one unlocked. A kitchen window, small but manageable. She hauled herself through, wincing at every sound, and dropped into the kitchen. The house was silent, empty. Clara moved through it like a ghost, her soft boots making no sound on the polished floors. She'd been here once before, years ago, when her father had come to discuss water rights. She remembered Garrett's office, down the hall, last door on the right. The door was unlocked. Clara slipped inside and closed it behind her, her eyes scanning the room. A massive desk dominated the space, filing cabinets lining the walls, a safe in the corner. Where would Garrett keep something that valuable? The safe seemed obvious, but Clara had no way to open it. She moved to the desk instead, pulling open drawers as quietly as she could. Papers, contracts, ledgers. So much documentation of Garrett's business dealings, his land purchases, his carefully constructed empire. But no letter. Clara was starting to panic when her hand brushed something at the back of the bottom drawer. A false bottom, she realized. She pried it up carefully and her breath caught. There. A sealed envelope with her father's handwriting on the front. To be opened by Clara in the event of my death. Her hand shook as she pulled it out. This was it. This was the proof she needed. She was stuffing it into her jacket when she heard voices outside. Men returning, their footsteps heavy on the porch. Clara's heart stopped. The trial must have ended early, which meant Garrett was back, and she was trapped in his office with stolen evidence. She looked around desperately for another exit, but there was only the one door and the window facing the front of the house. If she climbed out, they'd see her immediately. The voices were getting closer. Clara made a split-second decision and dove under the desk, pulling the chair in to hide herself, making herself as small as possible. The office door opened. "Don't care what the judge said," Garrett's voice tight with anger. "I want him dead by sundown." "Boss, the sheriff let him go. We can't just—" Silas, sounding nervous. "We can, and we will. He killed 3 of my men, turned Clara against me, made me look like a fool. I want him hunted down and strung up, and I want it done tonight." Clara's blood went cold. The trial was over. Kyle was free. But now Garrett was going to kill him anyway. "What about the girl?" Another voice, one Clara didn't recognize. "I'll handle Clara myself. She'll fall in line once her Apache friend is dead. Women always do, once they realize they have no other options." Footsteps moved around the office. Clara pressed herself further under the desk, barely breathing. "Get the men together," Garrett said. "I want 10 riders. Good shots. Ready to move. Track him, corner him, and kill him. Make it look like he resisted arrest or tried to escape. I don't care. Just make sure he doesn't leave this county breathing." "Yes, sir." The footsteps retreated. The door closed. Clara waited, counting to 100 before she dared to move. She had to get out, had to warn KL, had to— The door opened again. Clara froze. Footsteps, slow and deliberate, moving around the office. Then they stopped, right in front of the desk. "You can come out now, Clara." Garrett's voice, soft and amused. Clara's mind raced, weighing options. She could stay hidden, hope he'd leave. But he knew she was there. Somehow he knew. She crawled out from under the desk, her hand going to the jacket pocket where the letter was hidden. Garrett stood in the doorway, blocking her only exit, a pistol held loosely in his right hand. "I have to admit," he said conversationally, "I didn't think you'd actually be stupid enough to break into my home. But then again, you've made a lot of stupid choices lately." "Where's Kyle?" Clara demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Your savage friend?" "Oh, he's free. For now. Judge ruled self-defense, lack of evidence, whole thing was a waste of time." Garrett's smile was cold. "But don't worry. That particular problem will resolve itself shortly." "You're going to kill him." "Of course I am. Can't have him running around, can I? Might give you ideas about fighting back, about thinking you have choices." He moved closer, the gun still pointed at her. "Now, why don't you tell me what you came here for?" "I was looking for the truth." "Truth?" Garrett laughed. "Truth is what I say it is, sweetheart. I own this county, the sheriff, the judge, the banker. Your precious truth doesn't mean a damn thing against that." "Then you won't mind if I leave?" She tried to move past him, but he blocked her path, the gun coming up to point directly at her chest. "I mind very much. You see, you're going to stay here, in this office, nice and quiet, while my men take care of your Apache problem. And then, when that's done, we're going to have a long conversation about your future, about the choices you're going to make if you want to keep breathing." Clara's hand slipped into her pocket, fingers closing around the letter. "I'm not marrying you, Garrett. Not ever." "Yes, you are. Because the alternative is watching everyone you care about die, and then dying yourself. Your choice, really. Marry me and keep your land, your life, your dignity, or fight me and lose everything. I'd rather lose everything than give you the satisfaction. Garrett's face darkened. Stupid girl. You think you're the first woman to tell me no? You think that's ever stopped me before? He moved closer, close enough that Clara could smell whiskey on his breath. Your father said no. Told me he'd never sell, never let me take this land. You know what happened to him? Clara's breath caught. You killed him. Arsenic in his coffee. Slow acting, looks just like a heart attack. Clean, efficient, impossible to prove. Garrett smiled. And when he was gone, I thought you'd be easy. Thought you'd see sense, accept my proposal, make this whole thing simple. But you just had to be difficult. The admission hung in the air between them, confession and threat all at once. Clara's hand tightened on the letter in her pocket. Her father had known, had suspected, had written it all down. You're insane, Clara whispered. I'm practical. Your father's land plus my land equals the biggest ranch in 3 territories. That's not insane, that's good business. Garrett reached out, grabbed her arm. And you're going to help me build that empire, whether you like it or not. Clara twisted, trying to break free, but his grip was iron. The gun pressed against her ribs, cold and absolute. Let me go! Or what? You'll scream? Nobody's coming to help you, Clara. You're all alone. But he was wrong about that. The window shattered inward, glass exploding across the room. Garrett spun, his gun swinging toward the threat, and in that instant of distraction, Clara ripped herself free and ran. She made it 3 steps before Garrett grabbed her again, throwing her against the wall. Her head cracked against the wood paneling, stars bursting in her vision. The letter fell from her pocket, fluttering to the floor. You little... Garrett started, then stopped, staring at the envelope. His face went white, then red. Where did you get that? From your desk, you murdering bastard. He dove for the letter, but Clara was faster. She snatched it up and ran for the broken window, hearing Garrett's roar of rage behind her. She hit the window frame at full speed, crashed through, and fell. The ground rushed up and she landed hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. But she held on to the letter, clutching it to her chest as she scrambled to her feet. Gunshots cracked from the house. Clara ran, zigzagging toward the trees where she'd left the horse. Behind her she could hear Garrett shouting orders, men emerging from the bunkhouse, more shots. A bullet whined past her ear. Another kicked up dirt at her feet. She was 50 yards from the trees, 40, 30. The horse screamed and bolted as gunfire spooked it, disappearing into the brush without her. Clara's heart sank, but she didn't stop running. She hit the trees at full sprint, branches tearing at her clothes, her face. Behind her, the pursuit was getting organized. Men on horseback now, their voices calling coordinates. She couldn't outrun horses, couldn't hide forever. But she could try to get far enough, fast enough to... A rider appeared ahead of her, blocking her path. Clara skidded to a stop, turning to run the other way, but there were more riders there too. She was surrounded, trapped, and the letter in her jacket suddenly felt like a death sentence. The riders closed in, forming a tight circle. Clara pulled the letter out, held it up high. "This is proof," she shouted. "Proof that Garrett Moss killed my father, that he forged debt papers, that he tried to force me into marriage. You all know it's true. You've known all along. Are you really going to help him cover this up?" The men exchanged glances, uncertain. One of them, a younger cowhand Clara vaguely recognized from town, shifted in his saddle. "Miss Vance, we're just doing our jobs." "Your job is murder now? Is that what you signed up for when you took Garrett's money?" "Nobody said anything about murder," another man muttered. "Then let me go. Let me take this evidence to a real judge, a real court. Let the truth come out." For a moment, Clara thought it might work. Saw the doubt in their faces, the hesitation. Then Garrett rode up, his face twisted with rage, and the moment shattered. "Take her," he snarled, "and get me that letter." The men moved in. Clara tried to run again, but there was nowhere to go. Hands grabbed her, pulling her down. She fought, kicking and clawing, screaming until someone clamped a hand over her mouth. The letter was ripped from her grasp. Garrett dismounted, walking over to where they held her. He took the letter, turned it over in his hands, then smiled. "Thank you for finding this for me, Clara. I'd been looking for it." He tucked it into his jacket. Now let's go somewhere quiet and discuss your future. What's left of it? They threw her onto a horse, tied her hands. Clara's mind was racing, desperate for options and finding none. She'd failed. Failed Cale, failed her father, failed herself. They rode deeper into Garrett's land, away from witnesses, away from help. Clara knew where this was heading. Garrett couldn't let her live now, not after she'd seen the letter, heard his confession. He'd kill her and claim she'd had an accident, gone missing, been taken by Indians. Whatever lie served him best. They stopped in a small canyon, high-walled and isolated. Perfect place to hide a body. Garrett pulled her off the horse, cut the ropes on her wrists. "Here's what's going to happen," he said, his voice almost pleasant. "You're going to write a letter. A confession, actually. Saying you made up all these lies about me because you were hysterical with grief. That you seduced the Apache, used him to attack my men. That you realize now you were wrong, and you're so overcome with shame you can't go on living." Clara's blood went cold. "A suicide note." "Very good. Then you'll take this gun." He pulled a small pistol from his jacket. "And you'll end it, quick and clean. Or," his voice hardened, "I'll make it slow, painful. Make you beg before the end. Your choice." "You're insane." "I'm thorough. Now write." He shoved paper and pencil at her. Clara took them with shaking hands, her mind frantically searching for a way out, any way out. And then she heard it. A sound like thunder in the distance, growing closer, hoofbeats, many of them. Garrett heard it too. He spun, his hand going to his gun, just as riders poured into the canyon from both ends. But these weren't Garrett's men. Sheriff Barnes led them, his badge catching the light. Behind him rode at least 20 men, townspeople, ranchers, even the mayor, and in the middle of them, very much alive and free, rode Cale. Relief flooded through Clara, so intense it almost brought her to her knees. He was alive. He'd found help. They'd come. "Garrett Moss," Barnes' voice boomed across the canyon. "You're under arrest for murder, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Drop your weapon and step away from Miss Vance." For a frozen moment, nobody moved. Garrett's men looked at each other, at the overwhelming force facing them, at their boss who'd just been caught red-handed. Then one by one, they raised their hands in surrender. All except Garrett. He grabbed Clara, yanking her in front of him like a shield, his gun pressed to her head. "Back off," he shouted. "All of you, or I'll kill her right here." "Don't be stupid, Moss," Barnes said. "It's over. We got witnesses. We got evidence." "What evidence? That letter?" Garrett laughed, wild and desperate. "It's in my pocket. You'll never get it without killing me." "Don't need the letter," Cale said quietly, and every eye turned to him. He swung down from his horse, walked forward until he stood at the edge of the standoff. "Got something better." He pulled something from his jacket, papers, Clara saw, official-looking papers with seals and signatures. "Turns out your banker's got a conscience," Cale continued, his voice carrying, "or maybe he just got tired of being used. Either way, he gave me copies of the real accounts, the ones showing you forged the debt papers on the Vance Ranch, showing the payments you made to various people to keep quiet about your business dealings. And," he pulled out another document, "the death certificate you had your doctor friend alter to cover up the arsenic poisoning in Samuel Vance's body." Garrett went very still. "That's not—" "You can't." "Already did. Sent copies to the territorial governor's office this morning, along with affidavits from 6 of your former employees who were willing to testify about your methods once they knew they wouldn't hang for it." Cale's eyes were hard. "You're done, Garrett. Only question now is whether you let Clara go peaceable or whether this ends bloody." The gun pressed harder against Clara's head. She could feel Garrett shaking, the desperation rolling off him in waves. "I won't hang," he said quietly. "I won't give you that satisfaction." "Then let her go and we'll talk about alternatives." For a long, terrible moment, Clara thought Garrett was going to pull the trigger anyway, take her with him out of pure spite. But then the pressure eased, the gun lowering, and he shoved her forward. Clara stumbled, caught herself, and ran. Straight to Cale, who caught her in his arms and held her like he'd never let go. Behind them, Garrett raised the pistol one last time, but not toward them, toward himself. "No!" Barnes shouted, but he was too far away. The shot echoed through the canyon, and Garrett Moss fell. The silence that followed felt heavy, final. Clara buried her face in Kael's chest, feeling him solid and real and alive against her. Around them, men were moving, checking Garrett's body, securing his men, beginning the cleanup. "You came," Clara whispered. "Told you. I don't walk away." Kael's arms tightened around her. "And when the judge let me go, when I heard Garrett's men planning to come after you, I knew I had to move fast." The banker turned out he'd been keeping insurance of his own. Didn't trust Garrett any more than your father did. Soon as I explained what was happening, showed him the pattern, he gave me everything. Kael pulled back enough to look at her face, his thumb wiping away tears she hadn't realized she was crying. "You were right. The truth did matter. Just took the right person believing it." Sheriff Barnes approached, his expression grim. "Miss Vance, you all right?" "I will be." Clara forced herself to stand on her own, even though her legs felt like water. "Sheriff, about what Garrett said." "I heard it. We all heard it." Barnes looked uncomfortable. "And I owe you an apology. Should have listened when you first came to me. Should have investigated instead of assuming. That's on me." It was a small apology for nearly costing Clara everything, but it was something. "The letter," Clara said suddenly, remembering. "My father's letter. It's in Garrett's jacket." One of the deputies retrieved it, handed it to Clara with respectful care. She opened it with shaking hands and read her father's careful handwriting, his warning about Garrett, his suspicions, his love for her clear in every line. "He knew," she whispered. "He knew, and he tried to protect me anyway." "He did protect you," Kael said quietly. "Gave you the strength to fight. The rest, that was all you." The ride back to town was slow, somber. Garrett's body was wrapped and tied to a horse, his men under guard, the whole ugly business finally exposed to the light. Clara rode beside Kael, their horses close enough that their legs almost touched. She kept looking over at him, making sure he was real, that this wasn't some fever dream born of desperation. "What happens now?" she asked as the town came into view. "Now you go home. Rebuild. Take back what's yours." Kael looked at her. "And I?" "Stay," Clara interrupted. "You stay. With me. Help me rebuild. Make it ours instead of mine." Kael was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached over, took her hand. "Ours," he agreed. The town treated them differently after that. Not with full acceptance, that might never come, but with a kind of grudging respect. Clara Vance had stood up to Garrett Moss and won, had fought for her land, her freedom, her life. That counted for something, even in a world that didn't want to admit women could be that strong. They rebuilt the ranch over the following months, Kael working alongside Clara, their hands equally blistered and equally determined. Word spread. The Apache warrior and the white woman building something new on land bought with truth and blood. Some people talked, some people judged. Clara stopped caring. She and Kael were married that winter, not in a church but on the land itself, with the sky as their witness and a justice of the peace who rode out from Santa Fe. It wasn't legal in every territory, but it was legal enough. And more importantly, it was real. The ranch prospered. Clara proved to be as good a manager as her father had been, and Kael's knowledge of the land, of weather and animals, and how to survive in hostile territory made them formidable partners. On quiet evenings, they'd sit on the porch and watch the sun set over land that was finally, truly, theirs. Clara would lean against Kael's shoulder and remember the girl who'd run into the prairie, terrified and alone. That girl felt like a stranger now. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one night. "Stopping for me that day? Everything that came after?" Kael was quiet, his arm around her shoulders. Then he turned her face toward his and kissed her, gentle and sure. "Not for a second," he said when he pulled back. And looking into his eyes, seeing the life they'd built reflected there, Clara knew she didn't either. The prairie stretched out before them, endless and unforgiving as it had always been. But they'd learned to stand on it together, to make it home. And that was worth every fight, every scar, every impossible choice that had brought them here. Clara Vance had run from a forced marriage and found freedom, had faced down a man who thought he owned the world and proved him wrong, had chosen love on her own terms, in defiance of every rule and expectation. She'd survived. More than that, she'd won. And on that wide, untamed frontier with Kael beside her and her father's land stretching toward the horizon, Clara finally felt like she'd come home.